Good morning. This meeting of the SERS Board of Directors is now being recorded for record-keeping purposes. By participating in the session, you are consenting to the recording, retention, and future viewing of this meeting. This meeting is also now being live-streamed. Thank you. Please proceed.
Good morning, everyone. This is the regular meeting of the State Employees Retirement Board on September 29th, 2021. We will now come to order. I'd like to welcome the board members and millions on live stream. I am Dave Feldman. I'm the chairman of the board. And what I'd like to do is say what today in history, in 2008 was a bad day. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 777 points. It was the largest single-day point loss in Wall Street history. We will not be replicating that today. On a brighter note, today in 1966, the Chevrolet was introduced, the Camaro was introduced by Chevrolet. It's a nice muscle car. So with that, I have an august body of trustees here today, and we will now go into a roll call vote. Terry Sanchez, please.
Okay. Mr. Becker.
Here.
Senator DeSanto.
Present.
Chairman Philman.
Present.
Is Representative Frankel? And then I believe we have Dan Acco on Representative Frankel's behalf.
I'm here.
Was that Dan? I'm sorry.
Yes, that was Representative Frankel. Just having a little bit of difficulty here, but I'm okay now. All right.
Okay, Representative Frankel is here. Thank you. Treasurer Garrity? Or Christopher Craig on behalf of Treasurer Garrity?
Here.
Thank you. I believe we have Mr. Lindsay on behalf of Senator Hughes.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Jordan?
Here.
And I believe that's on Mr. Representative Schemmel.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Ms. Soderberg?
Here.
Secretary Thal?
Here.
And Secretary Vague?
Here.
Thank you. We have a full participation, Chairman.
Excellent. We have a quorum also. With that, the first piece of the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. A motion is in order to adopt the agenda for the September 29th, 2021 board meeting. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
I hear a second. Anyone on the question? Seeing none, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion is carried. The second is a motion is in order to approve the consent calendar items as listed for the September 29th, 2021 board meeting. Do I hear a motion to that effect?
So moved. So moved.
I hear a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Anyone on the question? Seeing none, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. With that, we'll go right into our agenda, and we have some special presentations today to start off, and I'll turn it over to our Chief Investment Officer, Jim Nolan. Jim?
Thanks, Chairman. Yes, this is a very important segment of our meeting here today, but I just want to stress and emphasize that the first and foremost, our fiduciary commitment is the first, as Secretary Vague said during the hearings. That's the first step in our process, meeting those fiduciary duties, solving for the optimal portfolio for members to meet our obligation, which is ultimately to make sure every beneficiary receives every dollar that they are entitled to. So with that said, there's an emphasis in the investment community that's getting a lot of publicity along the lines of environmental, social, and governance investing. There's been some funds started. There's been some adoption of it, but it can come into conflict with that ultimate fiduciary duty. But there certainly is room when the fiduciary obligations are met to address some other components of the program that this board desires. So what we're trying to do today is bring in some experts to bring some education into the boardroom. First off, we're going to have the Callan team, Bud Britt and Tom Schingler. They'll come in and give an overview of the whole ESG topic And this is similar to what they gave last year, a little bit longer version last year. This one's more of a narrowed down version, so that we'll be starting with that. And that'll be in section 5A of Board Docs. So if you can open up that presentation first, please. And then secondly, we'll come on after Callan's complete with their presentation. We'll move into an update on what is happening specifically within this environment of ESG here in SERS. We have money in the ground, we have investments, and you're going to hear about that from Meredith Jones and Bill Trong, two folks in our investment team. And then finally, we'll wrap it up with a minority-owned firm that would have loved to come here in person, but obviously the situation didn't allow for that. But you'll be hearing from them. They have been working with SERS for about 3 years now, helping us manage our legacy private investment portfolio. And then they're also very involved in tapping into that market where there's an investment universe of up-and-coming firms that are owned by diverse folks, and they have a specialty in that area, and they're going to give us some pointers on successes that they have seen out there and things that we can think about as a board. So we'll go ahead now and call the Callan folks to come on up and sit back and enjoy the ride listening to these experts on this area. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Jim, and good morning, everyone. We were asked to provide education on ESG, so that refers to environmental, social, and governance factors in investing. And I'll go through a brief presentation. We were given half an hour, so I do want to leave time for any questions and comments. And the intent here is to provide education on the foundation of this topic. It's a topic that gets a lot of industry coverage and public press coverage, but there's a lot of confusion, I think, about what the terminology actually means, how it's relevant to investing, and we're going to try and set a foundation here that could be useful for future discussions to the extent the board wants to pursue those. So if we could go to the first slide, please. So this is the team at Callan that focuses on ESG. I'm part of that team, and it's a cross-functional team that covers our manager research function, our systems and programming function, because a lot of what we're doing from a data collections process is requires that team. And also the group that I'm in called the Fund Sponsor Consulting Group that works with clients like SERS. So it's a cross-functional team. Public markets research, private markets research like private equity and real estate, infrastructure, and those of us that are client-facing with support. And we're touching really all of Callan. There's no avoiding this topic at this point. It's coming up across our client base regardless of the type of client that it is. So really everyone at Callan has to get up to speed on this topic because our clients are demanding it, and we regard it as an important area for education for our clients. So if we can move to the next slide. This is a taxonomy that we use to define ESG. So actually, if you go back to the Trump administration, they set a new rule that's commonly known as the ESG rule. It's a financial factors in selecting investments rule. That's the official name. And when they set that rule, they actually said we can't determine agreed upon language for ESG. So they settled on the concept of pecuniary versus non-pecuniary, so what's financially related versus not. And the reason I bring that up is that it is reflective of the confusion on this topic and what is meant by ESG. And what we attempt to do here with this taxonomy, which I think is generally agreed upon with some debate within the industry, is looking at the material factors in ESG. So these are factors that could be financially material to the performance of a company in an investment across these three categories. I'm not going to go through all of these in the interest of time, but If we think about it from an E perspective, these are related to how a company is interacting with the physical world. So think about issues like environmental damage that a company could cause and what the financial implications are for that. That would be what we consider an ESG risk in the E category, but there's also opportunities. So if we think about the impact of climate change and attempts to become more energy efficient, there's also opportunities from an investment perspective. If you think, for example, about there are companies that focus on better insulation. That's one example where if we have more efficient insulation in homes, then that uses less energy to heat homes. So part of this is about risk and part of it's about opportunity. From an S perspective, this is one that I think some struggle with because it can be harder to wrap your mind around what is exactly meant by S factors. So this is relating to how a company interacts with its stakeholders. So that could be internal stakeholders like employees, it could be external stakeholders like the community in which a company operates, its customers. So it's relating to that. And if you think about opportunities, one good example that some asset managers will look at is a company that provides better benefits to its employees, has better compensation. It can lead to higher rates of retention and to higher rates of productivity as a result. So that would be an example of where the S could be related to better ultimate financial performance. And risk, think of things like customer dissatisfaction, damage to a brand that could impact a company's performance or security performance. And then governance, this is the one that I think is the most intuitive and has the most historical, obvious link to financial performance is governance, right? If you think about a company that's well governed, it's going to tend to have better financial performance long term. So think about factors like, do you have an independent board that's distinct from the C-suite? Do you have proper compensation alignment for the senior executives? And then it also relates to factors like the diversity of the board. So if you have a diverse board, that board's going to tend to make better decisions than one that's a homogenous group. So there's opportunities there in terms of companies that are better run, and then risks in terms of companies that have poor governance. So that's the taxonomy. If we go to the next slide, thank you. This is getting into how can we apply this terminology in investing. So what are some of the strategy applications? And the way that we think about this at Callan is there's the perspective of the asset owner. So an asset owner like SIRS that are fiduciaries for a trust. So what are they potentially trying to accomplish with integrating material ESG factors? And then on the other side, there's the asset managers that are investing the assets, or what spectrum of approaches can they take to invest assets where they're incorporating ESG factors. So this is a schematic that we use. We believe it's a sound one. You'll see variations of this across our industry. Again, there's not a set group of definitions, but this is generally agreed upon. So I'll start with the concept of exclusionary screening. So when we talk about exclusionary screening, this is the most traditional way of thinking about ESG or socially responsible investing, where you think about the idea of we're going to take out part of our investment universe. This is more of a legacy approach in some ways to ESG integration. From a Callan client perspective, where this is most common today is religious organizations or mission-based organizations where, from a values perspective, they're saying we don't want to invest in certain types of securities. So think about religious organizations that may wish to screen out sectors of the market like alcohol and tobacco. That's an obvious example. Then when we get into the middle, that's where the potential goals are different, where the asset owner or the asset manager wishes to integrate ESG factors that could be material because they think that it could help with risk mitigation and potentially with alpha generation. And then you have the idea of sustainable or thematic strategy. So a common implementation of this is strategies that are focused specifically on the impacts of climate change, where an asset owner or an asset manager is saying, we think the risks of climate change are real, and there's both threats to that from an investment perspective, but also opportunities, companies that are positioning for an energy transition, for example, or we know there's issues with water availability in some parts of the world. So companies that focus on water treatment, or companies that are focusing on energy efficiency, like the insulation example I gave. And then finally, you have the concept of impact. So impact is where you're explicitly saying, we're not only pursuing a financial objective, we're also pursuing an impact objective. So it's about achieving a positive return, but also about some kind of positive societal impact. That could be environmental, it could be related to some kind of social issue. So it's a different lens through which to pursue investing. And where we most commonly see impact investing is typically in the endowment and foundation space, where you're not beholden to the same fiduciary standard as, let's say, an ERISA plan is, that's subject to ERISA regulatory frameworks. And then finally, we have this arrow across the bottom of stewardship. So what's the point of that? The point of that is to say that regardless of the approach taken, there is the concept of stewardship of assets. And I think the most obvious example here is passive managers. So if you think about a passive manager that is responsible for investing, in some cases, trillions of assets. BlackRock today manages almost $10 trillion, and most of that is passive money. So the concept there is, how does an asset manager there pursue stewardship in terms of achieving strong long-term performance, where how are they engaging with companies to address material ESG risks as part of their fiduciary duty. So that's the concept of stewardship from an asset manager perspective, and it also applies to asset owners like SIRS in terms of their proxy voting policies. And I believe SIRS staff is going to address that in their presentation in a few minutes. So that's a high-level view of the spectrum of implementation approaches that an asset owner can take in terms of implementing the portfolio, and then also that asset managers are taking today in the market. So if we go on from here, I'm not going to go through all the detail, but this goes into more detail on each of these implementation approaches. So exclusionary screening, again, this is most common with our client base, at least with religious organizations, where they are removing a part of the universe. And of course, that does potentially have an impact on return, right? It may lead to tracking error. It could be positive or negative for performance, but you're screening a universe based on certain objectives. It could be objectives related to the mission or values of the organization, but that may impact your performance negatively or positively, but you're doing it based on reasons that relate to typically to mission or values. And then if we go from here into partial integration, this is more relevant to SIRS. If we were to engage with all of your managers and have them come before the board, there are going to be managers in your lineup of managers that are doing this already. So they're not doing it because SIRS told them to. They're doing it because they believe that there are material ESG risks, and so they want to incorporate that into part of their investment process. It's not driving the portfolio construction. It's not driving the buy and sell decisions, but it's part of the mosaic that they're looking at when they examine investment opportunities and risks. If we go to the next slide, incorporation, this is where a manager is saying that they believe that ESG risks and opportunities are going to be a driver of potential alpha relative to a broad benchmark, and considering material ESG risks is also going to help mitigate portfolio risk. So if you think about it from an investment perspective, it could be, well, we're going to examine ESG factors, and we're going to, as part of our buy and sell decisions, we're going to want to invest in companies that are best in class from an ESG perspective. And we're going to reduce our exposure or not have exposure to companies that we believe have material ESG risks that could impact their future financial performance. So the implementation of this can be both active and passive. So you can have passive strategies. This is quite common today, where they're taking ESG data ratings, saying we want to invest only in best-in-class companies and build a passive portfolio that way. And there's also active strategy implementation of this nature, where asset managers are building portfolios where ESG material risks and opportunities are driving the buy and sell decisions in the portfolio. It's not to say that's all they look at, of course, but saying that we're going to go beyond the balance sheet, the traditional financial factors, we're going to look at these other risks and opportunities as part of our decision-making process. And then the next, sustainable and thematic. This is where you're still typically investing relative to a broad market benchmark. So let's say the Russell 3000 for US stocks, but you're taking a thematic approach to investing. It could be typically an active strategy that is focused on specific themes. The most common ones from an equity perspective are focused on a transition to a more sustainable economy, where you have more focus on renewable energy, water efficiency, waste reduction, and the like. And you're still investing typically against a broad market benchmark, but you are going to have material tilts to what sectors and securities you invest in because of the thematic approach of the asset manager. And then on another example would be on the bond side, where you have managers that are focused on, let's say, green bonds, where they know that the use of proceeds are for specific objectives. And finally, impact. I covered this a little bit. So this is where, again, it is where there's that dual objective of return and impact. And depending on the type of client we're working with at Cowen, this may not fit from a regulatory perspective, because it may not meet the fiduciary hurdle of the sole interest of the member and the beneficiary, the prudent investor rule. It really depends on the strategy, but this is where you are focused on not just financial return. And this is both, we see this both in public markets, and there are private market strategies increasingly, so areas like private equity where there's these types of impact investment strategies. If we move on from here to the next slide, please. So from a Cowen perspective, we're doing education with our clients. We're customizing what we do to the client. We always want to be respectful of our clients' situation, so that could be, depending on the type of client. If I take an endowment or foundation, it could be their mission or their values. If it's a corporate plan that's subject to ERISA, of course we have to abide by those regulations. And if it's a public plan, some of our public plans have different state rules than others. So there's federal rules, and there's also state rules that apply to our clients, and we have to be cognizant of that and invest within that framework from a fiduciary perspective. So we always start with research and education, engaging with the board and the staff, defining objectives, documenting them, and then if the client desires, we will then pursue an implementation approach. And then the cycle goes from there. Typically for clients that are integrating ESG factors, this is done over a number of years. This is not something that you do in one meeting or 2 or 3 meetings, because you have to go through education, you have to go through documentation, decide if you want to implement, how you do that, monitor it over time, and modify as needed. So this next slide, this shows it on a schematic. If you just go one ahead, please. So this is a set of steps that we can take with a client, where it starts with the type of board and trustee education we're doing right now, It moves there from there typically before any action is taken to documentation, because it always has to start with governance. You have to have what your policy is documented in your investment policy statement or investment beliefs for clients that have those. It has to be reviewed by legal counsel, and then you can pursue implementation, and that can vary by the asset class. ESG can be integrated into how manager searches are done. And finally, in some cases, clients pursue targeted investments. We've included examples there, clients that are pursuing specific objectives like economically targeted investments. That's an example of that. And then, as I said, the path is going to evolve over time. So this is something that, if done prudently, it has to be done in sequential steps and done in a fiduciarily sound way. If you go to the last slide, this is where we'll conclude. So happy to take any questions or any comments. And we've listed some potential actions that CSRS could take. So you could say, well, this is a brief initial education. We want to continue this conversation. Are there specific areas that CSRS want to focus on, or a specific asset class? We also have an ESG survey that we do. Those results are coming out shortly. We can review those results so you can see what other plan sponsor peers are doing. And then we've also, these are longer term, but we've also added other steps like, could you potentially have ESG considerations included in the CSRS IPS? And you may choose to do nothing. You may say, we've taken this education and we're going to continue to monitor the landscape, but we don't want to do anything at this stage. So thank you for the time, and happy to take any questions or comments.
Any questions for Tom?
I see a hand. Can't tell who it is, though.
Okay, Representative?
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks for the presentation. This is an area I look forward to learning more about, and I think it would be good to have more education, especially as a comparatively new board member. I keep ever on my mind the fiduciary responsibility that we have toward our annuitants. We take their money, we're supposed to manage it, we're supposed to maximize returns so that we can ensure that they have a good retirement. That's our mission. We don't have any other mission than that. I also think about the appropriateness of making paternalistic choices on investments using the annuitant's money. I'm an elected legislator, but we on this board are not elected. We're appointed, we're appointees. So I think about what's appropriate in that regard. And I also think about, given the large size of the investments that we have, ensuring that our ESG policies don't drive corporate policy. I do appreciate and want to learn more about how you factor in, sort of the what you would say the business factors of ESG decisions. If there is a bad actor, in the corporate world, what risk that involves, and that certainly is, I think, very invaluable for us to know as we make strategic decisions on investments. Because we don't want to end up with a Union Carbide or something like that if that could be sort of divined in advance. But I am very concerned that the board could move away from making decisions that are best for the financial stability of the fund, and instead trying to achieve other social objectives, which may be laudable but are not the objectives of maximizing returns for the fund. So I would appreciate more information and learning more about this, going forward. Thank you.
Christopher Craig.
So I think my question is similar to the representatives. In the presentation, at several points, there was kind of a natural tension between objectives of an ESG initiative and fiduciary duty. While I recognize that state-sponsored pension plans are not technically ERISA covered, they certainly do follow that, and we've always been very cognizant of our fiduciary obligations. So kind of going forward, I would be interested to know, how does a pension board resolve or address, or maybe then it's incompatible and you don't go down that road, but I would like a more direct discussion on that kind of natural tension that seems to exist between the fiduciary duty as a representative articulated and some of the objectives of ESG initiatives.
Yeah, I think it does depend on the approach, and what we want to do is give you the spectrum because it's important to understand what the spectrum is, where in these conversations, folks can be talking past each other because there's not that common understanding of what is meant by ESG factors, what are the approaches that you could take. So where I think you could have attention to that question is, if we go back to that slide that shows the spectrum, if you could go back, it's I think it's slide 4. Yeah, 4. So one more. Thank you. So this is where, to the question, where could you potentially have attention is on exclusionary screening. So if you're taking out a lot of your universe for reasons that are not, you're not saying it's for financial reasons, and you're documenting it as such, that could present fiduciary risk. Partial integration and incorporation, that's where, particularly from an asset manager perspective, they're saying that these are material ESG risks and opportunities. So we're incorporating them into our process because we believe that they are financially material, and if we didn't consider them, we would not be pursuing our fiduciary duty to our clients. So that's where there is not attention. Sustainable, potentially there could be, and impact there potentially could be as well.
So when you talk about that, doesn't that really kind of depend? You know, when you specifically identify a particular type of risk as ESG risk, you're no longer defining it or talking about it as it were just a business risk. And it seems to me that that has the potential, depending upon the circumstances, of being pretty slippery slope. I guess what I'm not understanding, and maybe today's not the right opportunity, maybe tomorrow is, but I don't see the bright line, or I worry that there may not be as much of a bright line as you described between, quote, ESG risks versus simple business risks. You know, if we talk about a deep water oil exploration and drilling, that has an environmental risk, but it's really a business risk. Do they have safety protocols to ensure lines don't explode, et cetera? So I just highlight that as I'm a little bit skeptical as to the bright line that has been described, and would like maybe in the future at the appropriate time a little bit deeper dive into what you just described as risk mitigation.
Yeah, and I think happy to do it. I think we're saying the same thing, because what I'm talking about is risks that, let's say, an asset manager is identifying as financially material. It's not because there's a negative externality of this could have environmental damage. It's the impact to that company.
I see another hand, but I don't have a name there. Who's got their hand up?
This is Mary.
Okay, Mary.
Thank you very much for this presentation, and really appreciate the comments of the other board members. And, you know, I see this as more us paying attention to the reality of what's happening in the world. A couple of years ago, I was concerned about climate change, but I kind of thought that was many years down the road. I don't think it's many years down the road anymore. You know, things are changing, and I don't understand it, but things are changing. I can see it in my own life that you know, the weather patterns are changing. I can see in the little park that I volunteer at that we've got plants that never used to be there, and they're moving north. And we've got insects that we never had before. So things are changing. I'm also had the opportunity to sit in on a census presentation a couple weeks ago. And I was really surprised to learn that 43% of the people of Pennsylvania are persons of color. You know, I didn't know that, but that's what the data is showing. And I also learned that by 2045, it'll be over 50%. And I look at our board and I say, we don't really reflect or represent the diversity of this state. I'm the only woman on the board. The treasurer is appointed because of her position, and I was so glad to see her appointed and be a woman. But we're not diverse in that respect. We're not diverse with persons of color either. So I do see this as an opportunity for us to step back, look at what's happening in the real world, and realize that our investments, our primary goal is making good investment decisions to retain and grow the value of our investments. But it's also making certain that they're sustainable investments. And the way that the world is changing, we need to be paying attention to ESG issues. And because the world is changing, something that might have been considered a very sustainable, solid investment 10 years ago, today might no longer be such a good idea. So anyway, good things to think about and talk about. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Anybody else? I see another hand up. Senator.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I would just like to point out, I think there's a lot of diversity on an opinion on this board, and I think that we overlooked that a little bit. So just thought I'd drop that in there. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I don't see anybody. Oh, yes, I do. I see somebody else. They have their hand up.
Representative Frankel.
Yes, Frankel.
Oh, okay.
Thanks. I really, Tom, really appreciate the presentation, and I couldn't agree with Mary more. I mean, it's something that sustainability in particular, which I think is at the heart of many of the issues around ESG, is something that we need to look at. It's a long-term view. But let me ask you. I mean, obviously there are pension funds. I believe that prioritize ESG, and so there's those folks that deal with fiduciary requirements as well. What does performance look like in funds that emphasize ESG? And how have others addressed this fiduciary issue that some of our board members have, I think, legitimately asked about?
So, Representative, on the performance, I can't tie it to performance. There's so many factors that drive performance. Asset allocation being the first and foremost driver. But in terms of how they do it, it's similar to what the discussion we've been having today, where it's working with the staff, the outside advisors, the asset managers, legal counsel, and everything that they're doing is with a fiduciary lens of that fiduciary duty, the duty of loyalty, duty of prudence. So they're saying that to the extent ESG is being integrated, it's based on what is regarded as financially material and documented as such. So it's not saying do these things for other reasons than that are inconsistent with our fiduciary duty. They may, in some cases, there are clients that are acknowledging that there's positive externalities. I'll give an example where there are strategies. This is, I think, a good example of a strategy that can serve dual objectives and have still be fiduciarily sound. So there are strategies that focus on lending mortgage lending to underserved communities. So you can actually target specific areas of the country that you want to address with your investments, but they're still benchmarked to a market benchmark. They're achieving performance objectives that are consistent with any other similar strategy, but they're also serving a societal objective of addressing one of the United States' great challenges, which is affordable housing. So we have a number of public funds that have pursued that as a fixed income strategy. And we at Callan have supported those investments because they've been fiduciarily sound, but they have also had this objective. It's not, the stated objective and the results have not been, we're going to sacrifice performance in the name of achieving these objectives. So I think that's an example where it is serving those dual objectives, but then the most common example is what I've been saying earlier, is where the client or the asset owner, the public fund, is saying, we believe ESG factors can be material. And they're communicating that to their asset managers. The asset managers typically have policies related to ESG integration, which is very common today. And to lesser or greater extents, those asset managers are considering ESG factors in their investment process consistent with their fiduciary duty. They're saying, we're considering these because we think they could have an impact on financial performance. They may have some managers that say, we don't really think this is very relevant. They may only include it to a little small extent, whereas other managers, it's fully integrated into their process. They may in fact view it as a differentiator in terms of what drives risk mitigation. So it certainly is being done, but every step along the way, you have to do it in a fiduciarily sound way. You have to analyze it, document it. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
Could everybody please put their phones on, or your mic on mute? We're getting some back feed there. Anybody else in the question? Okay, thank you, Tom. Very good presentation. Give us a lot to think about. Jim?
Okay, thanks, Chairman. And thanks, Callan team. Appreciate that. As you can see, the board very receptive of your presentations, as always. And now moving on to our next informational presentation here. Again, there's no voting or motions on these three presentations. They're updates for the board and education credits included. If we go to 5B in board docs, you'll find a presentation labeled CSRS ESG Emerging Manager, Diverse Women-Owned Investing in PA Update. That's a mouthful. But as you can see at the first page of the table of contents, they'll give you a sense of where CSRS has money in the ground already. And again, I'm going to emphasize the fiduciary obligation is the first step in the process. We work with the consultants to ensure that to be the case before we come to the board. But when all else is equal, these are interests of board members that have been expressed to us, and we have been able to work and meet our fiduciary duties as well as address some of these things that board members are interested in. So with that, excuse me, we have Meredith Jones. Meredith, are you present here? And Bill Trong. Okay, Bill Trong. There's Bill. Okay, so Meredith and Bill, if you would take it away, please. And I think we're running a little bit behind on this time, so keep that in mind as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jim. I'll try to cut out some of the comments I have and be as brief as possible. Good morning. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Meredith Jones, and I've been with the investment office now for almost 12 years. And today we're here just to give the board a brief overview of how CSRS Investments are investing in diverse women-owned managers, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, how we incorporate ESG into our everyday practices, and a brief update on CSRS Emerging Manager Program, and highlighting some of the proposed updates that we'd like to bring to the board in the future. So as we go through this discussion this morning, we want to note that the SERS board here has been proactive over the years addressing the various ideas such as diversity, investing in Pennsylvania, and ESG into our everyday practices. However, all of these different concepts are reported in different locations. So we thought, as we just heard from Callan, we wanted to give you the broad overview on ESG investing. And then we wanted to take this presentation to give you an overview in one location of the many different ideas that SERS has already employed that fall under ESG factors. Then following this presentation, the board will have a chance for an education session presented by Fairview Capital. And they'll not only be providing an update on the assets they currently manage for SERS, but they'll also be educating us on how to access emerging managers and how to do it in the most efficient way possible. So if we kick off the presentation and we turn to slide 3, please. We wanted to start by just highlighting the diverse and or women-owned managers that are currently in SERS investment portfolio across all asset classes. This is an example of the information that we provide every year to the legislator in the supplemental budget materials, and this outlines all of the managers that are self-identifying or identified by our consultants as diverse women-owned managers. And this list is as of year-end 2020. We go to slide 4. This is just highlighting the Keystone Legacy Fund, which is managed by Fairview Capital. And as we said, they'll be here shortly to give us a presentation. We just want to highlight them because they've been an incredible partner with SERS, providing oversight of the Keystone Legacy Fund. And as you all know, the Keystone Legacy Fund was a special purpose vehicle that was established in 2017 to manage the wind down of SERS legacy private equity assets. Upon the start of the relationship, there was approximately $1.2 billion worth of assets transferred to Fairview. Today, there's approximately only $500 million remaining in the fund. And we'll let them give you more details and highlight their successes in just a few minutes. Next, we'll turn our focus to looking at some of the investing that we've done to support Pennsylvania. And on slide 6, please. Investing in Pennsylvania has been a long-standing commitment of SERS Board, and when possible, when it's consistent with the Board's fiduciary duties, the Board has looked for opportunities where it can better the Commonwealth through SERS investments. Slide 6 is demonstrating the managers that the Board has hired that are based in Pennsylvania. And if you turn to slide 7, it's illustrating the data that we publish every year in the budget book, but it's detailing the direct investments into Pennsylvania, which as you can see is roughly over $500 million, and these investments are made through companies both public and private that have headquarters and operations in Pennsylvania, as well as real estate holdings that are physically based in Pennsylvania. If we move forward in the presentation, we'll go to slide 9, please. Here we wanted to just sort of highlight a few of the concepts that are in the SERS U.S. and international proxy voting policy. This policy outlines all the guidelines that SERS follows when voting on management and shareholder proposals. The policy, it's in depth with approximately a 50-page document, and it can be found on the intranet, so at any time anyone can take a look at it and see exactly what's all incorporated in that policy. Some of the examples of different policy guidelines are in the boxes below. We just took a sample of each section here. I think environment usually sort of speaks for itself. We wanted to highlight social a little bit, as this was a particular example of a guideline that was just added last December when the board went through and approved several new policy guidelines, and the SERS board added a guideline outlining its commitment to promoting diversity by both race and gender at the companies we invest in. And then the governance category here is another example of where the SERS board newly adopted last year some additional enhancements to the already established management say-on-pay guidelines in regards to pay and incentive awards for corporate directors. If we can go on to the next slide, please. On slide 9 is just a little bit of the data as has proved out since the beginning of the year, from January 1st, 2021 through roughly the middle of August this year, and how CSRS's proxy voting policy has been guiding the votes that have been put before it. In general, CSRS has voted in favor of 9 proposals related to the environment. CSRS voted against proposed directors in approximately 11% of the votes cast due to a lack of diversity by either race or gender on companies' boards. And in the instance of governance, CSRS cast approximately 12% of their votes against compensation proposals because they did not meet the outlined criteria in the proxy voting policy. If we move on to slide 11, we wanted to continue to illustrate other ways in which we incorporate ESG into everyday practices. And another one of these ways is through the initial due diligence process. The initial due diligence process is performed by CSRS IO staff and consultants on potential investments before an investment is presented to the IC and board for their consideration and approval. During this process, the investment office requests the proposed manager complete a diversity template, which we also then include in the memos provided to the IC during the hiring process. And we also ask the potential manager if they're a member of an ESG-related organization, such as the Council of Institutional Investors or the Principles of Responsible Investing. And finally, the due diligence questionnaire also asks potential firms to provide its formal statement, if one exists, that describes the firm's approach to identifying and managing ESG factors within their investments and portfolio management process. Next, if we go to the next slide, actually, next one after that, thanks. We'll talk about 2 different yet similar concepts. The first we'll talk about is CSRS Emerging Investment Manager Program. The CSRS Emerging Investment Manager Program was adopted several years ago by the board in the IPS, or as the Investment Policy Statement is what that stands for. And this program was designed to gain access to talented investment managers in the public equity market space in their early stages with funds that were typically on the smaller side. And we were looking to generate above benchmark returns. When making the selection of the managers of managers that were hired to run this program, those managers are looking for investment managers that meet the program criteria of early stage managers, as well as the possibility of being in Pennsylvania and or diverse women-owned entities. Slide 14 is an example of the 2 managers that have been hired under this program. Exponence is a diverse woman-owned firm based in Philadelphia and was hired for a non-U.S. small-cap equity mandate. Leading Edge is a diverse manager located in San Francisco to manage funds in the emerging equity space. As we'll discuss in a little more detail towards the end of this presentation, CSRS Investment Office will be asking the board to consider expanding the Emerging Investment Managers Program within a future update to the IPS. Next slide, please. And the next, perfect. Another example of CSRS investing in emerging managers is our private equity portfolio, which is currently not under the formal umbrella of the Emerging Investment Manager Program. The Horizon Impact Fund, which was established by the board in 2013, is currently managed by HarborVest Partners. The objective of this fund is to invest in private equity funds with $750 million or less in total commitments. As you can see, as shown on this slide, approximately $150 million has been committed to this mandate, with 76% of that capital invested with significantly diverse and or women-owned managers, and 71% of the managers were significantly diverse, of course, per HarborVest's definitions. So where do we go from here? We've addressed a lot of different ideas through this presentation. If we look at slide 18, slide 18 and 19 lays out a few of the initiatives that the investment office is looking to propose and have conversation with the board, Initiative 1 which we briefly touched upon already in this presentation, is that the investment office will be proposing updates to the Emerging Investment Manager program. The investment office is proposing to expand the program by including additional asset classes such as fixed income and including private equity by adding the Horizon Impact Fund into this program formally. And as a nice side conversation, it also happens to correspond with a couple of the recommendations from the Funston report that we've talked about over the last few meetings. In addition to the aforementioned items, the investment office would also like to propose language to add to the program that will incorporate veteran-owned managers into this program as well. The second initiative, which we'll actually be accomplishing in a few minutes, is with having an education session led by Fairview Capital. And they'll be teaching us all how we can efficiently access emerging managers in the private equity space. Third, and we'll like to expand this to all asset classes going forward, when conducting an investment manager search, SIRS will look to put emphasis on diverse and/or women-owned businesses when all other metrics are equal. Fourth, the investment office staff will research and develop a report on ESG data and activities, and will look to present that to the board in the future and hopefully on a more regular basis. We're thinking maybe annually. At this point, format and content of this potential report are still being determined. We have a lot more research to do, but in the meantime, if there's any aspects of ESG data that you'd like to see possibly included in the report, I encourage you, please don't hesitate to reach out to Jim and to let Jim know what you'd like to see in this, or Terry. I know they're both extremely open to any suggestions and comments you may have, as well as myself and investment office staff. We're really looking for feedback on this. Next slide, please. The fifth initiative we have outlined here, actually the fifth and sixth are very similar in nature. As so many aspects of our business model were affected by COVID, the SIRS Investment Internship Program was no different. As we start to craft the new normal, one of the many benefits that comes from being able to work remotely is the fact that we can look to expand our recruiting and search areas to broaden them from just central Pennsylvania. We're going to look to expand to not only redesign our internship program, but to be able to reach out to and establish new relationships with colleges that are all across Pennsylvania, and putting in an additional focus on the historical Black colleges and universities that are within the state. We're also going to engage with the three groups listed here on the slide. That will be an additional resource and outreach to obtaining qualified and really talented interns going forward. This, of course, will be a combined effort between our office and SIRS Human Resources Office. And as we get closer to launching this program, we'll definitely come back to the board and let you all know where we're at, what we're doing, and when these searches will begin. And lastly, much like the internship program, working remotely also brings new opportunities to SIRS in how we recruit full-time employees. We're going to work to re-engage and start new relationships with the organizations outlined here, and we'll also look to keep the board informed as we're posting new employment opportunities. In addition to broadening the employee recruitment opportunities, we're also excited to work with the groups listed here to expand our search areas when looking for new investment managers, making sure that new possible manager relationships are made aware of manager searches so they have an opportunity to make sure all of their information is loaded into the consultant databases and are ready to be included in the initial search and screening processes. I know I've covered a lot of ground here today in a relatively short amount of time, and trying to wrap all of these different ideas into one location and one presentation. All these ideas are interconnected, yet I know they're in various different formats. So it's my hope that this overview is bringing a lot of these different pieces together in one place. And as a board member, you'll find it helpful as you look to improving new investments and new policy updates as we bring them to you in the future. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, And as always, I know Jim also welcomes any feedback and suggestions you may have as you're talking to him in the future. So thank you.
I open the floor. Go ahead.
I just have one comment just to follow up, Meredith, on this slide here. You know, we just wanted to thank Exponents, which is the public equity firm out of Philadelphia. They've been working with us on, you know, they're a female African-American owned firm, Tina Powell Williams, and they've been working with us to connect us to these organizations on how they recruit women and minorities in their firm. So these are names and connections and networking. You know, we need to improve on our process on how we recruit interns and how we recruit professional staff if we want to make some changes and get better results in the terms of recruiting staff.
Senator DeSanto.
Yes, thank you. Meredith, could you provide the performance of Exponents and Leading Edge in comparison to their peers and relevant benchmarks?
I actually don't have that at my fingertips. Bill, do you happen to have that at your fingertips?
Oh, you can get it to us later, or, you know.
Okay, not a problem.
Thank you.
No problem.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much, Meredith and Bill. Jim?
Thank you, Chairman. And Meredith, outstanding job. That was a wonderful recap. We have covered components that built up this database that Meredith drew off of to create this presentation over the years. And it's so helpful, especially to the new board members, to see everything that's happened in one concise package and how it relates. So thank you. Really well done. And Bill, thanks for wrapping that up. We do have an emphasis for the internal recruitment process, and Katie Matthews is very supportive with us when we want to go to targeted colleges and so forth. So we're looking forward to making more progress on this front. And also happy to introduce the emphasis that Bill mentioned, or Meredith mentioned early in the presentation, on our Emerging Manager program to enhance that to also include veteran-owned firms as well. That's another area of opportunity that we see. And with that, we have some smiling faces. I see Joanne Price and Michelle Chautai out there, anxious to bring us up to speed on the wonderful job that they're doing for us with our legacy assets that Meredith referenced at the beginning of her presentation. And then I look forward to hearing what experts in the field, on the ground, what they actually are seeing, what they've done, and what they see others are doing, other plans, and they can share these thoughts with us. So with that, Michelle and Joanne, please take it away. And could you have everybody, the team, introduce themselves first, because we do have some new board members that haven't seen your presentations in the past, so thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. And my name is Joanne Price, one of the founders of Fairview Capital. And I will introduce the team actually now, where it's on page 5, the team that we have today. Let me just run over to page 5, and then we'll go back. So there's myself, Joanne Price, one of the co-founders. Cindy Sang, who is one of our partners at Fairview. Peter Rouchois, who is our Chief Financial Officer and who will be talking primarily about the Keystone program and the work that we have done for you under that program. And he is largely responsible for delivering the program to and the response that we've gotten from you and working with you on the program, and manages the team that is performing the program. And then we have Michelle Chautai, who directs all of our business development efforts around the country and the world, and she is absolutely fantastic. And then Kwesi Quay, who is one of the principals of Fairview, and he is also working on the Keystone program with respect to the investments, the annual meetings, annual calls, all the things that have gone into managing that particular program. So this is the team that's serving you under the Keystone program, and I think I can say, and I'm sure the staff that's worked with this group can say, that it's been totally interactive, and we have worked closely with you to make sure that the results that you are expecting, we are actually delivering. So let me go back to page 3, just to start out. Fairview Capital, we were founded in 1994, owned by myself and Lawrence Morse. We've been in business over 25 years. I cannot get to a point of saying more than 25, but we started in 1994. We're totally independent, 100% owned by the team and employees. We have a specialized approach in investing in the private markets, where we use the relationships are key, the market intelligence, and it also allows us to make very good investment decisions. We're focused on delivering, obviously, the best returns. We're deeply embedded in the private equity business, and we have brought a unique aspect to our firm, which we'll talk about, which is the firm's diversity and the culture which we have created as a result of that. When we were founded, and I think this is very important, we basically were SEC registered, and we made sure that we were in the position to serve institutional clients and primarily public pension funds. So we have been serving public pension funds since our founding, and have a roster of excellent funds across the country, and we have been able to maintain those relationships and build on those relationships and add new relationships. So next page, please. So we're going to be talking to you today on 2 areas. Next generation managers will be our second presentation, and right now we are providing you an update on the legacy asset management program. And then on page 5, you will see the team that is absolutely serving you today, and has been doing that work over the last 4 years. Next page provides you an overview of the Fairview team, and our next presentation we'll talk about the experienced, diverse, multi-generational investment team, and this team, of course, has a major role in the investment in the multi-generational and multi-ethnic groups. And then the second page here, page 7. This group has been the group that has been primarily responsible for the legacy asset program under Peter Rouchois' leadership, and then obviously the investment team also has been a part of this program. But with respect to delivering this program, developing the program, working with the team at Pennsylvania, making sure everything that you wanted and required was being done, this team has been the team that has delivered those results. And we also had to ensure, and you had to be sure, that we were doing it in the way that you absolutely needed with respect to your reporting, your requirements, your compliance. So all that has been done. And so now I will turn it over to Peter Rouchois to talk through the program that we are delivering to you.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. So picking up on page 9 with our legacy asset management platform, as Joanne outlined and Meredith picked up in the prior segment, Fairview Capital provides legacy asset management services to PA CERS. In this particular instance, PA CERS staff selected a number of relationships to move to a newly created entity, the Keystone Legacy Fund, and this entity is 100% owned by PA CERS. Fairview provides day-to-day oversight of the portfolio and acts as an extension of the CERS investment office. Moving along to page 10, speaking to the seamless transition process. We had moved these private equity assets into the legacy fund as mentioned, and PA CERS engaged Fairview in April of 2018, and beginning in July of 2018, Fairview assumed cash management, consolidating the number of cash accounts for these investments from over 160 down to 1, and managing ongoing flow of capital to and from investments to PA CERS. We provide financial reporting with quarterly financial statements and annual audits, as well as investment oversight, which includes continuous interaction with underlying managers, review of investment materials, and making decisions on amendments and extensions. Moving ahead to page 11. Fairview maintains continual communication and timely reporting to provide full transparency to PA CSRS. Since the transition period and onward, there have been regular calls with staff to provide updates on reporting and investment activities, whether it be weekly, monthly, quarterly, or ad hoc as required. We've provided all manager cash flows, financial reporting, and activity summaries to PA CSRS to maintain full transparency of data. Fairview supports CSRS reporting requirements through outreach to underlying managers for carried interest information, recalculation of manager fees for adherence to partnership agreements, and fee estimates for budget planning purposes. Fairview maintains communication with consultants and advisors to ensure agreement of data across the portfolio and provide insight into the secondary market. Now moving on to page 12, we'll talk about some of the data points and milestones for the Keystone Legacy Fund. So since taking over cash management in June of 2018, $540 million has been received in the form of cash distributions. $56.8 million of public stock has been liquidated. And this aggregate of $597 million returned to PA CSRS represents over 50% of the portfolio value when we started this process in June of 2018. And then $22.7 million has been contributed to underlying managers, so much smaller than the cash flows coming back to PA CSRS. We've also reviewed and executed 119 extensions and amendments, taken part in over 200 advisory board and annual meetings, and oversaw the liquidation of 47 of the underlying partnerships, or 28% of the original portfolio. Now I'll turn over to Cindy to give a little bit more detail on the portfolio itself.
Great, thank you, Peter, and nice to see everyone virtually. So turning on to page 14, in this section, we want to update you in terms of Fairview's strategic value add. That is in addition to the tremendous amount of work and collaboration we have had with the PA CSRS team. Page 14 is an overview in terms of what has transpired since the last time we met in February of 2020. As you can see, this portfolio continues to age as the underlying partnerships are winding up. And this is shown by the number of partnerships and relationships declining as older partnerships wind up their most tenured funds. Meanwhile, the capital paid into partnerships increased modestly, and this is expected as for the most part, these partnerships are in their respective what we call harvesting phase of their investment life cycle. Thus, the need for additional follow-on capital is rather small. I would say the highlight of this page is the distribution and the increase in the dollars distributed back to PA CSRS. You can see that the cumulative distribution grew to $7.2 billion over the past 18 months from $6.9 billion. And this brings your distribution to paid-in capital to 1.3 times. And as expected, the value or the net asset value of the portfolio decreased, and the decline in value is essentially delivered back to you in the form of distribution. And so we look forward to continue to manage and monitor the portfolio partnerships as they continue to harvest and provide additional liquidity. Now, turning on to page 15, one of the things that we do at Fairview is to make sure that we continue to maximize value on your behalf. So one of the value creation lever for us is to stay in close contact and dialogue with secondary intermediaries and other constituents to make sure that we know the market environment when it comes to thinking about a secondary transaction. I would say that currently market conditions remain very strong with dry powder at an all-time high of approximately $231 billion. And also pricing is now at the highest point in the past 3 years. But I think most of all, what's important here, given the age of this fund, buyers are now more willing to consider purchase of older and mature portfolios. Now, this is different from what we saw 18 months ago at the onset of the pandemic, but now I think investors believe that they have better transparency into the risk-reward profile of these underlying assets. And so to give you a sense, on page 15, we've laid out the age of the portfolio. You see that it's a 50-50 split in terms of, funds over 15 years and then funds under, in that 10 to 15 year time frame. And then on page 16, this is the portion of the analysis where we break down the portfolio by investment type, and you can see that private equity takes up 41%, venture in that 60% proportion. And so, I think given the strength and what we're seeing in the secondary market, we are, in many conversations with intermediaries and the like to make sure that we are maximizing value on your behalf. And so in closing, on page 17, at least for this part of the presentation, we want to reiterate our commitment to you, to PA CERS. And more importantly, our continual interaction with your investment staff really have allowed us to deepen relationship with you and your plan. And then with that, we also want to say that, the objectives you set out and hired us 4 years ago have been met. And as we continue to optimize value, monitor and report on your fund on a timely basis, and I would say, last but not least, continue to seek opportunity to generate additional liquidity. So with that, this is the Keystone update. And so we're happy to answer any questions you may have before we move on to the education piece on emerging managers.
Any questions? Okay.
Okay, if Michelle, if you're ready to move on to the second segment, we can go to, okay, there we go, the presentation's up there, or for those that aren't looking at the live stream, that will be under 5C on board docs. The second presentation, Fairview EM Education Slides, September 29th, 21. With that, take her away.
Okay, I'm coming back again, and once again, I'm Joanne Price. As I indicated early, and I enjoyed the Callan presentation, and we have had past interactions with Callan, so we think very highly of their firm, and we have been vetted by them over time, and so it's always been a very excellent relationship. I want to say that, and I want to start by saying this, and this is very important. When Fairview was founded, one of the objectives of Fairview was to build a diverse firm. We felt that it was very critical that if we were going to have and build a diverse portfolio, it was very important that the firm itself be diverse. And so as we were reaching out to hire professionals, we were looking for the very best professionals, but we were looking for diversity at the same time. And so Fairview has been able to do that in every way, with respect to ethnic diversity, with respect to diversity of thought, with respect to age diversity, and it's becoming more diverse over time. And also to ensure and to make sure that at Fairview people come as they are, with all of their gifts and all of their talents. And that's very important in the private equity business because it is the entrepreneurial aspect of the private markets. And it also enabled Fairview to be able to move out across the nation and to be able to find and promote and invest in a diversity of private equity opportunities. And I want to stress that because at no time, because Fairview was built to interact and work with public funds. And to be honest with you, public funds have been primarily responsible, in my opinion, for where we are with respect to diversity as we see it growing. So even though with your fiduciary responsibilities, which of course is number one, the public pension fund market has also found ways to incorporate and include diversity all across the spectrum, and we have seen that across the country. So what I want to stress here, and I think it's very important, for Fairview, our philosophy was if we expand the opportunity set to all people with respect to racial, ethnic, gender, everything, the opportunity for great returns only increases. And that's the basis and the thesis on which we built Fairview. We were always very sensitive and actually never used the word social in the building of Fairview because we wanted to make sure and to ensure that as institutional investors looked at Fairview, they were looking at a firm that would only increase and enhance the opportunity for even greater returns because of the ability of us to look far and wide and include all people with respect to building the Fairview portfolio. So that's what we've done, and I think that's very important as we talk about the next generation manager programs that we have built from the beginning. So as I indicated earlier, and we're going to talk about the next generation managers, we talked about legacy. We have a venture program, high-end venture program. What we have been able to do is to take some of the diverse managers, because we have a pretty large pool of capital from a variety of investors, and we have been able to put diverse managers that have gone into the second, third, fourth funds into our high-end venture capital and growth equity portfolio because of the returns. So we're being able to diversify all across the board with respect to what we do at Fairview, and that includes co-investments. So it also says, and I think we have made the case, that when we think of diversity, we should never, ever think that it's going to limit returns. Never, because that does a disservice to diversity in and of itself. So I want to also turn to page 6, if you will. And this team, the investment team, which you see is the experienced team, diverse, multi-generational. This is the team that has built the diverse program, the diverse equity, private equity program. And then, of course, on page 7, this team has full service in-house work with respect to the accounting work. And we are a full service organization, so we do everything in-house, and all the staff at Fairview, we are totally integrated with each other. So there is not silos and where we're separated. We're totally integrated, and that allows us to do our work even that much better. But I just wanted to spend a couple extra minutes on understanding the philosophy of the firm, and that philosophy has been very important as we have built the firm. So I'm going to turn it now over to Michelle Chowtai to take the next section.
Thank you for that, Ms. Price, and good morning, everybody. I hope for the day that we can get together and be in person one of these days. I'm going to kick off the next section on page 9. If you'll join me there, that'll be helpful. So, one of the questions we get asked is who are in the category of emerging managers and next generation managers? And the answer is the definition can vary in this space, depending on who you're speaking with and what jurisdiction, they're in. But for the most part, they include diverse funds, These are led by women and minorities or investment strategies targeting specifically underserved markets. Then there's new funds. These are managers raising their first, second, third time private equity funds. These are experienced people. Then there are small funds, and this segment represents tenured funds that are pursuing strategies better suited for smaller fund sizes. We have spin-outs and team-ups. This could be a management team existing in a large institutional entity, and they decide they want to launch out on their own and form an independent firm. Or there's specialty funds, which is any strategies really that don't fit into the traditional definition of venture or buyout within private equity. On page 10, we focus here on Fairview's database of women and minority-owned private equity for the entire universe. So, as Joanne pointed out, we've been tracking this segment of the market since our founding. It's almost 27 years now. And based on our research that we have compiled over many years of collecting this data, we've created and built out a database that captures all institutional, quality, diverse, and emerging managers' opportunities in this space. We knew we had to build out a dependable database that could be shared and used as a resource for others who are looking to build diverse investment programs. One of the things that we do is publish an annual report on the various diverse firms. It's highly credible, widely cited. You may have seen it yourself. We believe this data has been very important in the development of the diverse marketplace in this area. When we received a call from one of the largest banks in the country to learn more about this area, it was a sign that our efforts in getting the word out is certainly working. If you take a look at the graph on this page, on page 10, what we're seeing is this universe continues to expand rapidly, going from 100 firms back in 2014 to nearly 700 firms in 2021 so far. And on page 11, here we're talking about navigating the diverse manager market, right? There's no question. It can be complex and it requires specialization. Here we double-clicked on the woman and minority-owned firm universe of the prior page and data and broke down the data that we have into fund sequence, fund size, and fund strategy. So based on this data, the key takeaways here is the first, second, third time funds represent approximately 98% of the opportunity set, to Mary's point. Firm formation is robust, with first time funds making up 62% of the universe. And with respect to strategy, we found an increasing proportion of the opportunity set in venture capital. It was 74% in 2021. And 92% of diverse managers are raising funds less than 500. On page 12, here we take a look at the challenges facing diverse managers and how access to capital could benefit these firms and even maybe catalyze the diversity in the industry more broadly. And so the reality is we're no longer in the infancy stage here, right? There has been a maturing of the diverse manager field. There's been tremendous growth, as you saw on the prior pages. Getting access to capital from institutional investors like Pacers can actually help these firms grow independently. They will be better positioned to raise capital from other institutional investors. It can help attract more qualified, diverse professionals to the industry. And there's a multiplier effect here. Diverse firms hire more diverse talent and invest in more diverse portfolio companies. And on page 13 here, this speaks to the moment, we're in. We're in a very pivotal time in the private equity industry where essential resources are readily available for diverse managers, right? So anywhere from acquiring skills, getting guidance, to leveraging the workspace and the infrastructures of others, right? With all of the above, it's easier to start today. We know that fund formation is at record highs, right? As we saw on slide 11, there's, over 60% of the funds are raising first-time funds, to give you a sense of the opportunity. With that, I'm going to pass it over now to Kwesi Quay to talk about portfolio construction more specifically. Kwesi?
Sure. Thanks, Michelle, and good morning, everybody. You can join me on slide 14. There's certainly some practices that can be avoided when constructing an emerging manager program to ensure that the portfolio is optimized for success. And so in our view, you certainly don't want to put too many undue constraints on the portfolio construction. And what that means is if you add too many screens around diversity definitions, fund sequence, fund size, you may unduly narrow your opportunity set, resulting in adverse manager selection. Suboptimal manager selection is another point to avoid. Poor due diligence evaluating the team's strategy, past performance, and processes can certainly negatively affect an emerging manager program. Inconsistent deployment of capital, making one-off commitments, overexposing, commitments to one particular year are all examples of ways that could adversely affect the portfolio. So those are certainly some practices to avoid. That ties in with misalignment of interests. You want to ensure that the economics are a win-win on the GP and LP side. Being a passive participant in the emerging manager market is probably not ideal. You really want to be actively engaged. You want to be embedded in the ecosystem. To really have conviction in the programs, you need to be knowledgeable, or at least partner with a knowledgeable provider that can kind of educate and share, best practices in the marketplace. And then, certainly don't want to have any biases around return expectations. This is a program that has worked well for many clients, many institutional investors, and so I think coming with the mindset of this is going to be a top performing portfolio and developing a programmatic way to approach in this space is certainly something that should be celebrated. Turn on to slide 15. There's certainly a lot of third-party research which confirms that diverse-owned private equity firms actually do outperform their benchmarks. What you see here is a chart which is compiled by the NAIC. For those that don't know, the NAIC is one of the largest third-party trade organizations which covers diverse-owned private equity firms. And what they did was essentially gather the performance information of their members and benchmark that against Burgess, which is another performance provider. And what you'll see is that NAIC member firms have outperformed the Burgess median across most of these vintage years. So very simply, if the orange bar is higher than the black bar, that's outperformance by diverse firms. And if you were to go through that exercise, you notice that just under 80% of the years surveyed here showed outperformance. So there's clearly outperformance, and this is against the broader marketplace. When we look at it for slide 16, this is really the same performance data, just cut a different way. The left chart shows the net multiple, and the right chart shows the distributions that have been returned. So very simply, if you were to put $1 million into this subset of NAIC firms, your investment would be up 54%. That's relative to a 29% median return, which Burgess has reported, and that's above the 3%, the 1.03x multiple that you see there. So you're seeing broad outperformance when you look at the total value of the portfolio And then when you look at, what we also care about is the distributions. You want to ensure that you're getting your capital back. So the right chart shows the DPI meaning distributions over paid-in capital. And what you'll notice there is that between 1994 and 2018, again, you've seen outperformance, 0.69x DPI. That compares favorably against the median at 0.56, and then against the lower quartile at 0.07. So just to summarize all those charts, what you're seeing is just outperformance across all the performance metrics, IRR, TVPI, and DPI for diverse-owned private equity firms. If we go to the next slide, this is often made possible because there's a programmatic approach to investing in diverse managers. It's essential. It always starts with targeting best-in-class returns. You want to encourage, the broadest pool of investable funds, and then drive stringent selectivity. You want to define the mandates carefully, set out clear objectives, choose your constraints carefully, and leverage variables that encourage the inclusion, of the targeted funds. You certainly want to use the appropriate structure when implementing a portfolio. Diversification is, of course, paramount to risk mitigation. Manager selection is certainly even more important. You want to be partnering with experienced team members. The stability and likelihood of team members to cohere is paramount to a successful emerging manager firm. And then top performers can significantly outperform. One of the things I want to touch on, Michelle had mentioned earlier, was that the universe is primarily newer funds, smaller funds, and firms led by women minorities. It's important to note that many of these managers have established track records, have spent years at large firms, and so they have significant training as investment professionals. So when they spin out on their own, although they might be newer firms or raising first-time funds, what we found is that in many cases, these are investment professionals that have spent 15 to 20 years doing exactly what they do, just under a different moniker. And then you want to outline the working relationship. This is not something where you want to be passively, engaged in the marketplace. You want to work with a partner if that's what would be optimal for an institutional investor. But in any case, this should be an extension of the staff. And so that's really the working relationship that we think works well when building a portfolio. Next slide, please. And, aside from the portfolio itself, it's important for an institutional investor to be deeply embedded in the ecosystem. There's many hats that an institutional can take on. That ranges from ideation and firm building, making introductions, helping with branding, advising best practices around leadership, making any other introductions to peer LPs, providing, any kind of feedback around firm formation and legal docs, any guidance around strategy, portfolio construction, and pacing, as well as operations. And so those are some of the things that we think, are some of the best practices there. And then on slide 19, just to kind of, summarize what we've discussed here, at the end of the day, this is a universe that is growing rapidly, and in recent years, there's been a very strong talent pool of diverse managers. I think Michelle mentioned earlier the slide of, a 26% compound annual growth rate of the universe of women and minority-owned firms. If you were to just extrapolate that out, what she's basically saying is that the universe is doubling every 4 years. And so the opportunity set is strong, and it's growing tremendously. In our experience, the lack of access to capital is the single largest hurdle to highly qualified, diverse managers. Most diverse managers face challenges raising capital for a variety of reasons. Our experience has been mostly around misperceptions of risks and subconscious biases, and even skewed allocation policies, and lack of inclusiveness around what constitutes an appropriate screen to ensure the broadest opportunity set. We believe that if provided access to capital, diverse firms are better positioned to develop and further cultivate the talent in the industry while generating outsized returns. In our experience, other resources, including guidance and infrastructure, are readily available. But at the end of the day, a strategically designed investment program can generate social benefits and strong performance for the institutional investor. And now I'll turn it over to Joanne to pick up on our role in the ecosystem.
I actually alluded to this in the beginning, but as I said, we were formed in 1994, and you know, obviously what has happened subsequent to that. But we had 26 years in. Today we work for 23 sophisticated institutional clients. Some of them are in a commingled fund. Some of them are in a individual programs, depending on what they want to do. We have 110 emerging manager investments, which seemed almost impossible when we first started. And so this is really quite amazing. And the emerging managers we have evaluated, we're talking about 2 times that. So it has been extraordinary. And in 26 years, and to be honest with you, and Michelle indicated to me before this presentation that, you know, Joanne, be sure you're not selling Fairview. And I am not selling Fairview, but I will say this, that I have to say that from formation to where we are today, it is a compliment to the entire Fairview team and the many institutional investors that we have worked with and who had a belief system about this opportunity, that we are where we are today. And it's important that firms like us do well and continue to grow and to begin to provide information, data, databases, everything, so that others will feel comfortable being a part of this universe. Cindy?
Great, and I'll pick up on page 22. You can see on this slide that, you know, our experience and longevity in this space means that we have built up an expansive network. So when it comes to our pipeline, we see all institutional quality emerging managers who are currently out in the marketplace. Our sourcing framework comprises of 3 verticals, from inbound deal flow to network-driven deal flow to outbound deal flow. And I'll start on the right-hand side of this slide with the outbound deal flow, as I think this is the most active and interesting part of deal sourcing, and this is where the Fairview investment team maintains and cultivates GP relationships early and on a proactive basis. We cultivate relationships as early as, you know, an experienced manager we know who is thinking about spinning out from their existing firm to create his or her own franchise. We engage in research and talk to industry experts to find new managers tackling regions and or sectors that are not yet fully covered, if you will, by existing private equity firms in the marketplace. In terms of our industry-driven network deal flow, it really comes by Fairview's participation in trade organizations promoting an inclusive private equity and venture ecosystem. I'll just say and emphasize that, you know, we're not just members of these organizations. We put time into these by serving as board members, as ambassadors, and just advocates for women and minority in this industry. And so, you know, given our true north since founding, which is bridging the funding gap between emerging managers and capital allocators like yourself, we do a lot of research, we write research papers, and we also host numerous events to connect emerging managers with institutional investors. And of course, our inbound deal flow is very robust. It stems from our trusted reputation in this space, built from over 25 years of experience and leadership. On page 23, I think it's more or less the same in terms of, you know, the message of this session, but really want to point towards our authenticity and voice in this ecosystem. And I think that, to Kwesi's point earlier, investing in emerging managers cannot be passive or sporadic. It takes time to cultivate these relationships, and at Fairview, we really work at this space. We've been active, we've been continuous, we've been intentional in the way that we spend hours monitoring and counseling founders in this space. And many of them, whom we counseled years ago, are now leading private equity fund managers and venture firms that other institutional investors have a hard time accessing. And of course, we have the right allocation into those funds. So I'm going to turn over to Peter to talk a little bit, or a lot of it, about our performance in this area, as we believe that any type of investment into an emerging manager performance should be driven by performance. So, Peter?
Sure. So moving along to page 24, look at some emerging next generation manager performance against benchmarks. And as with any investment strategy, the primary objective is to produce superior risk-adjusted returns, and we see that happening with this strategy. Previously, Kwesi showed benchmarks using NEIC and the emerging next generation managers broadly, but just wanted to bring kind of a real life example here of showing Fairview's aggregate performance across the strategy and client portfolios, and that's what you see with the orange bar on the far left. And notably, that return is net of all fund and underlying manager fees. And you'll see in that 3 of the 4 time periods, the performance does exceed that of the benchmark, and most importantly, over the long term. So just leaving with the statement that, therefore, executing an emerging next-generation manager strategy does not come at the cost of investment performance. And actually just passing back to Cindy to wrap up.
Great, thank you, Peter. So on page 25, we just want to, say that every mandate that we receive, we have this conversation in terms of the particular objectives and goals for a customized emerging manager program. And these conversations are important because no 2 organizations are alike in terms of their needs and risk tolerance, and they all need different solutions. So when we set these objectives up front, it really, it sets the parameters around the vehicle so that, and it's proven to be beneficial, as you can tell from our returns in terms of fund performance and also in terms of GP and LP alignment. Like we said throughout this conversation, we've been investing in this space for over 25 years, and we really do believe that the number of opportunities are vast and they continue to grow. And this growth, per one of our slides before, it's growth with refinement. So meaning that these emerging managers have the experience and also the knowledge to deliver superior returns and generate additional alpha. And so we believe this is a good time and opportunity for you to consider using the right vehicle to access this segment of private markets. And with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle and Joanne to host any questions you may have.
So, James, are you going to manage this section?
Go ahead, Jim.
Actually, the chairman usually calls on folks that are raising their hand, and Chairman Philman, it's up to you if you want to continue doing that. I see Greg Jordan's got a question there, but...
all right, let's do it. Greg Jordan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question for Ms. Sang. When you were discussing slide 23, I think you talked about that there are sometimes institutional investors have a lack of access to diverse and emerging managers. And I was just wondering what those barriers are.
Yeah, sure. So and thank you for that question. For our emerging managers, especially those who are experienced managers spinning out from top firms, their experience is basically, their human capital. And so, institutional investors like ourselves, we really keep an eye on those partners usually who are, thinking to leave and form their franchise, especially if they have a powerful, robust track record to go with it. So in those cases, for that type of emerging managers, it is almost, the period of due diligence and fundraising is usually pretty short. They can be as short as, 3 to 4 months to 6 months. And so in those instances, we have found that if you're not there on day one, when they're thinking about forming their own shop, it is unlikely that you'll get access to that particular fund manager. And that's a very, I would say that's not the case all the time, but that is sometimes a scenario that we see.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your answer.
Of course.
Anybody else?
Could I just add to Cindy's comment?
Sure.
We have seen that more recently, but that was not the case earlier on, where you had people with experience, and the time it took for them to raise those funds was substantial, but that has changed over time.
Anybody else? I don't see any hands raised this time. So, Joanne, thank you and your team for a great presentation. And you were early, which is good. But I appreciate not only your presentation, but working with your crew and the good work you do for the SIRS organization. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Go ahead, Jim.
Can I add a couple words? And first of all, I want to thank Jason Berger, Ryan Morse, and Mariana Faziolva for their constant communication and work with the Fairview team. It is a lot of work. There's a lot of fund extensions and capital calls, distributions. Fairview's been successful in monetizing several of those investments. So there's been a lot of back and forth that goes on behind the scenes that the board doesn't see. So I just wanted to just put out a thanks to the team for all the effort. Steve Belusha as well, our analysts in that area. And also, you heard Joanne reference that she's not making a sales pitch. I just want to clarify, we wanted to make sure that the board got some continuing education credit, so to speak, for this session here, and it was purely an educational piece. Michelle is very happy to put together a proposal for Pennsylvania to get involved in the success that they're providing for others. So that's something we'll work with the consultant on and look if we see opportunities that, again, meet our fiduciary standards, but also address some of the concerns that board members had made to us to ask us to look at these areas. So we'll keep you posted, and you'll see more of that coming down the road. Chairman Philman, I hope I didn't use up the time savings they had, but I think we're right on the dot.
No, we're good. We're good. So very informative in all parts. So thank you, everybody, for your presentations.
Thank you.
With that, we will go back into our regular agenda, and it goes to the committee reports and action items. And the first one up is Securities Litigation Chair Greg Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The September 28th, 2021 meeting of the Securities Litigation Committee was called to order at 8:33 a.m. All committee members were in attendance. The committee unanimously approved the meeting minutes of the February 24th, 2021 Securities Litigation Committee meeting. In addition, Committee Counsel Jeff McCormick provided an update to the committee on the establishment of the Securities Litigation Pool, which has been jointly established with PSERS. Committee staff, Britt Ernie Nunez, provided an update to the committee on SERS as a signatory on an amicus curiae brief to the United States Supreme Court in the matter of Goldman Sachs versus Arkansas Teachers Retirement System. This is a very interesting case which has implications for both class certification and the burden of proof regarding damages. Followed by that, Committee Counsel Jeff McCormick provided updates to the committee on the class action receipts for 2020 quarters 4 and 2021 quarters 1 and 2, as well as the securities litigation report for quarters 1 and 2 of 2021. Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, the meeting adjourned then at 9:02 a.m. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the chair? Seeing none, we'll go into the Finance and Member Services. Chair Soderberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance and Member Services Committee met yesterday morning on September 28th at 9:06 a.m. And the first item of business was a report by our actuaries, Korn Ferry. They did their annual stress testing and risk assessment report. And the risk assessment report, for those of you who are not able to be at our committee meeting, the entire report is attached along with my committee report to the board agenda. But essentially, they look at key risk factors going forward. Investment volatility, changes in demographics, how long people are living, how long are they collecting their pensions, that kind of thing, and also contributions. And for us, our employers are state government entities, and are they making their required contributions on an annual basis? And they look at the different risk factors of what ifs. And they went through, and 20 years from now, they are projecting, assuming that we stay on the path that we are currently on, the baseline, that we will be 100% fully funded within 20 years. And they are projecting that by the end of 2021, we're going to be 67% fully funded. So some really good information came out of this report. A couple of things that they specifically commented on was that in recent years, state government has been meeting its requirements for the actuarially defined contributions for the fund, and that is a good and very positive thing. They also noted that SERS has assets that would be available if necessary, if there was an unexpected downturn in the economy, and they know that we had 86 weeks of liquidity, which was a very positive thing. They also noted the fact that at the end of December 2020, there was $31 billion in the fund, and they are projecting that by the end of 2021, there will be $37 billion in the fund. So that it was an excellent report, and once again, I encourage everyone to take a look at the report that's attached. The committee approved the acceptance of this report, and Mr. Chair, I would like to offer a formal motion for the board to vote on. I move that the State Employees Retirement Board accept the recommendation of the Finance and Member Services Committee to approve the 2021 Stress Testing and Risk Assessment Report prepared by SERS Actuary, Korn Ferry.
It's been properly moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I hear a second. Anyone on the question? Anyone on the question? Hearing none, the roll call vote, please.
Mr. Becker?
Aye. Aye.
Senator DeSanto?
This is Chuck Erdman for Senator DeSanto. Aye.
Thank you, Chuck. Chair Philman?
Aye.
Representative Frankel?
Aye.
Treasurer Garrity?
Aye.
Mr. Lindsay, I believe, on behalf of Senator Hughes?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Representative Schemmel?
Aye.
Ms. Soderberg?
Aye.
Secretary Thal? He may not be back yet. He had to step out. Secretary Vague? Do we have Secretary Vague? do we have someone on designee on behalf of Secretary Vague, either Mr. Bloom or Mr. Flanagan?
Hi, Terry. This is Alan. Aye.
Thank you, Alan. That's 10 yeses and 1 absent. Chairman?
Thank you very much. Committee report?
All right, thank you. The next item that we discussed was the review of the proposed 2022-23 budget for the SERS administrative funds. And this is something that is required by the Governor's Budget Office. We actually have to submit the proposed budget by next week to the Budget Office. And Sarah McSurdy, our Chief Financial Officer, reviewed the plan. Of note, the primary budget is the administrative fund that really covers most of the salaries and costs associated with our operations. And that is about approximately $33 million. And of note, next year's budget is going to be slightly less than this year's budget. And that is primarily the result of decisions that we have made in the last year and a half to bring in a lot of our IT work inside so that our own staff are managing it as opposed to relying on outside contractors. So Sarah also used this as an opportunity to introduce her budget director for SERS, and that Thomas Inners, who is a relatively new employee for SERS. I'd also like to mention that she also introduced another relatively new employee, Mike Goey, who is the Assistant Chief Financial Officer. So normally we would see these people on a regular basis, but they have been hired and working behind the scenes. So it was great to at least see their faces and begin to get to know them a little bit. Anyway, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I would like to offer a motion to present this so that we can send this budget to the Governor's office.
Go ahead.
Okay. I move that the State Employees Retirement Board accept the recommendation of the Finance and Member Services Committee to approve for fiscal year 22-2023 the following proposed budgets. 1. SERS Administrative Budget. 2. SERS Investment Budget. 3. State Employees Defined Contribution Plan Budget. And 4. Commonwealth's State Employees Deferred Compensation Plan Budget. Each substantially in the same form as presented in the Chief Financial Officer's September 28, 2021 report, and each as amended and or ultimately approved by the Office of the Budget.
Been properly moved. I hear a second.
Second.
I hear a second. Anyone on the question? Anyone on the question? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Representative Frankel will second.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Becker?
Aye.
Mr. Erdman on behalf of Senator DeSanto?
Aye.
Chair Philman?
Aye.
Mr. Acco on behalf of Representative Frankel?
That's correct. Aye.
Thank you. Treasurer Garrity?
Aye. Aye. Excuse me.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay on behalf of Senator Hughes?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Representative Schemmel?
Aye.
Ms. Soderberg?
Aye.
Secretary Thal?
Aye.
Is it Mr. Flanagan on behalf of Secretary Vague?
Yes. Aye.
Thank you very much. That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, thank you. The next item of business, Sarah McSurdy gave an update on the financial management, and that included a review of the changes in fiduciary net position, which was attached to the board agenda at the very beginning. Just a note, as of December 2020, we had $31 billion, and as of June 2021, we're up to $37.9 billion. So excellent work, everyone. The next item on the agenda was a update by Joe Torta, the Deputy Executive Director for SERV's Office of Member and Participant Services. And he took the opportunity to introduce two very key people in his shop, Leah Woodward, who is the Bureau Director for the Bureau of Member and Participant Services, and Kevin Skura, who is the Director for the Bureau of Benefit Administration. These are two people who are relatively new in their positions, and they're just very critical to making certain that we deliver the benefits to all of our members. He also reported that as of September 7th, all of our 7 regional counseling offices are now once again open after a year and a half of having been closed. He mentioned that there is still some hesitancy for people to come in for face-to-face counseling, and in fact, this is just a very short window of data. It's only been a month now, but only about 30% have opted to actually come in and do a face-to-face in-person counseling, and 70% have opted to do phone counseling. And the reason why it's phone counseling and not a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting is that a lot of our members work or home situations where they do not have access to computers where they could do a live Zoom meeting with a counselor. So the phone is what they've been using primarily, but Joe Torta's team is trying to come up with some other options going forward. There's also an initiative right now where we have a number of annuitants that are still receiving paper checks, and they're trying to reduce that number on a regular basis, and it actually they've been fairly successful in this recent initiative trying to get this small number of checks reduced. So that is good. And all new annuitants, it's automatic direct deposit, but we have older folks who have been holding on to their monthly trip to the bank, I guess. The other thing to point out that really surprised me, for the last year and a half, everyone's been under a lot of stress as a result of the pandemic, a lot of work changes, a lot of family changes, and what I had not recognized was that there's a ripple effect. And as our state employees were dealing with various stress levels and trying to determine, do they retire, do they postpone it, when do they retire, who are their beneficiaries? Do we need to update the beneficiaries? Do I need a power of attorney? All these questions that we all need to be asking ourselves. A lot more people have been asking those questions and reaching out to our staff in the last year and a half. So he said that his shop has been incredibly busy with a lot of additional inquiries coming through. So I just want to express my appreciation for all of the extra work that everyone has been doing over the last year. And that includes my report. One more thing, we expect to be meeting either on December 7th or December 8th for our next meeting. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mary. I'll be 90 years old when we hit 20, 40, 41 or 100%, and I'll drop by and say hi to everybody and congratulate you.
Very good.
Just like burning the deed of your house. It'll be great.
Yeah.
100% funded.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. With that, Chair Becker with the Investment Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday's meeting was called to order at 10:45. All members, with the exception of one, were in attendance. And for those that were not able to attend the meeting, our report has been uploaded to Board Docs. The committee approved the minutes of the July 27, 2021 Investment Committee meeting. Jim Nolan provided an update on rebalancing. There was a discussion of the BAAM Keystone portfolio, which currently resides in the private credit portion of the portfolio. And upon further analysis, it was felt that it was really a better fit for the opportunistic fixed income portion of the portfolio. It tends to be have a little more liquidity than is typically found in private credit, and it tends to be more of a capital preservation profile rather than return-seeking profile, which is again a better fit for the opportunistic subset. So by a vote of 10 to 0, it was recommended that the full board accept moving the BAM Keystone portfolio from private credit to opportunistic fixed income. So if I may read the motion, I move that the board accept the recommendation of the investment committee to authorize SERS staff to move the BAM Keystone portfolio from the private credit asset class to the opportunistic fixed income sub-asset class in furtherance of the current rebalancing initiative. May I have a second, please?
Yes, it's been moved. Do we have a second? Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Anyone on the question? Anyone on the question? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Becker?
Aye.
Senator DeSanto?
Again, Chuck Erdman, aye.
Thank you. Chair Philman?
Aye.
Mr. Rocco, on behalf of Representative Frankel?
Aye.
Thank you. Treasurer Garrity?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, on behalf of Senator Hughes?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Representative Schemmel?
Aye.
Ms. Soderberg?
Aye.
And is it Mr. Flanagan on behalf of Secretary Vague?
Yes, aye.
And Secretary Thal?
Aye.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. Glenn?
Great, thank you. Next on the agenda, Jim Nolan provided an update on the fixed income transition, the active U.S. long credit search, manager search, and the U.S. microcap equity search. And upon further consideration, these initiatives will be put on hold while the investment staff and Callan perform additional analysis. And we will be coming back to the committee on December 7th with some further suggestions. Next up, Tom Shingler of Callan provided the quarterly investment performance analysis as of June 30 for the defined benefit plan. Overall, very strong performance for the quarter, for the year to date, and for longer time periods. Performance for the deferred compensation and the defined contribution plans is available on Board Docs for your review. Next, Jim Nolan, along with Mike Ilio of Stepstone and Matt Ritter of NEPC, provided updates on the private equity, private credit, and real estate pacing. And due to the significant growth of the portfolio over the past couple of years, and as well as the increase in distributions from the current holdings, it will be necessary to add a significant level of new funds into the private equity and private credit portfolios. And just would like to just remind everyone that this is not, we're not increasing our exposure to the private markets here, but we're just maintaining a glide path to hit our target weights over the next several years. We then heard from Jose Feliciano of Clear Lake Capital Partners. We are presently invested with Clear Lake for both private equity and private credit with exceptional results. And this led to two recommendations to the board, one private equity opportunity and one private credit opportunity. And if I could read those motions, please.
Sure.
The first is for private credit, and this recommendation was made by a vote of 9 yes and 1 no. And I move that the State Employees Retirement Board accept the recommendation of the Investment Committee to commit up to $100 million to Clear Lake Capital Partners 7, LP, plus investment expenses and pro rata share of partnership operating expenses consistent with executed partnership documents as a follow-on investment within the private equity asset class, subject to successful completion of contract negotiations and execution and delivery of closing documents by all parties, including required Commonwealth legal approvals within 12 months.
Been properly moved. Do I hear a second? Do I hear a second?
Second.
I hear a second. Anyone on the question? Anyone on the question? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Becker?
Aye.
Mr. Erdman, on behalf of Senator DeSanto?
Aye.
Mr. Acco, on behalf of Representative Frankel?
Aye.
Treasurer Garrity?
I'm voting no on this investment because of our current overexposure to private equity. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, on behalf of Senator Hughes?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Representative Schemmel?
No.
Ms. Soderberg?
Aye.
Secretary Thal?
Aye.
Secretary Vague?
This is Alan. Aye.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Alan. So we have 8 yeas and 2 noes.
You forgot me.
Did I miss
Gary.
anyone? Did I miss anyone, Chairman? I didn't
Yes,
miss you,
you
did I?
missed me.
May I have your vote, please, Chairman?
Aye.
Thank you very much. That brings it to 9 yeses and 2 nos. And thank you for your understanding.
Okay, Glenn.
Great. Thank you. And I'll move on to the second motion. And this was by a unanimous vote of those present. And it is, I move that the State Employees Retirement Board accept the recommendation of the Investment Committee to commit up to $75 million to Clear Lake Opportunity Partner 3, LP, plus investment expenses and pro rata share of partnership operating expenses, consistent with executed partnership documents as a follow-on investment within the private credit asset class, subject to successful completion of contract negotiations and execution and delivery of closing documents by all parties, including required Commonwealth legal approvals within 12 months.
Been properly moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I hear a second. Thank you very much. Anyone on the question? Anyone on the question? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Becker?
Aye.
Mr. Erdman, on behalf of Senator DeSanto?
Aye.
Chair Philman?
Aye.
Mr. Acco, on behalf of Representative Frankel? Mr. Acco?
Aye.
Thank you. Treasurer Garrity?
Aye.
Mr. Lindsay, on behalf of Senator Hughes?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Representative Schemmel?
Aye.
Ms. Soderberg?
Aye.
Secretary Thal?
Aye.
And Secretary Vague?
This is Alan. Aye.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Alan. That's 11 yeses. Unanimous.
Thank you. Glenn?
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda, we heard from Sixth Street Partners regarding a follow-on investment within the private credit asset class. From this presentation, by a vote of 9 yes and 1 no, we had a recommendation to the board that this was a good fit for the SERS private credit portfolio. I could read the motion. I move that the State Employees Retirement Board accept the recommendation of the Investment Committee to commit up to $50 million to Sixth Street Opportunities Partners 5, LP, plus investment expenses and pro rata share of partnership operating expenses consistent with executed partnership documents as a follow-on investment within the private credit asset class, subject to successful completion of contract negotiations and execution and delivery of closing documents by all parties, including required Commonwealth legal approvals within 12 months.
It's been properly moved. Do I hear a second? Do I hear a second?
Second.
I hear a second. Thank you. Anyone on the question? Anyone on the question? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Becker,
Aye.
Mr. Erdman on behalf of Senator DeSanto,
Aye.
Chair Philman,
Aye.
Mr. Acco on behalf of Representative Frankel,
Aye.
Treasurer Garrity,
I'm going to be an aye. I'm changing my vote from no to yes because we received some additional information from the investment team, which I appreciate. Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Lindsay on behalf of Senator Hughes,
Aye.
Mr. Jordan,
Aye.
Representative Schemmel,
Aye.
Ms. Soderberg,
Aye.
Secretary Thal,
Aye.
Mr. Flanagan on behalf of Secretary Vague,
Aye.
and I'm missing one, it looks like. Or I have all. Yes, that would be unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you
I'm
very
sorry, so not sitting around the table and looking
No.
at the screen and everything. I apologize if I'm a little
No,
off
Terry,
here.
Terry, I confirm you got all 11. Yep.
Thank
all
you
yes.
very much. Appreciate it. Appreciate those extra set of ears and eyes.
Glenn?
Right. Well, that concluded the new business portion of our meeting. We did not break for executive session, but informational items may be found on board docs for your review. We had a motion to adjourn at 12:50, and our next meeting is scheduled for December 7th. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. I will now go into the Board Governance and Personnel Committee report, which is my committee. You can find it's a lengthy report. It's under 6C or yeah 6D in the board docs. But I'll skim over as best and try to hit the highlights as we go forward. We met yesterday at 1:18 p.m. Everybody was in attendance, either the actual board member or designees. But we had a full agenda, and a lot of it had to do with the fiduciary review and a board self-assessment, which was presented by Chris Houston and gathering the comments that not only Funston but you as board members had presented to the survey. First was the SIRS fiduciary review and board assessment final report, implementation recommendations. We reviewed a matrix of recommendations from the Funston final report that was assigned to us. For updates 1.3, the board should consider term limits of 3 terms of 2 years for board and committee officer positions. So that would provide for 2-year terms for committee members, 2-year terms for committee chair and assistant chair positions, and term limits of 3 consecutive 2-year terms for committee officer positions commencing in 2022. 4.3, keep a record of dissenting opinions and concerns on no votes, which identify the issue or reason prompting that vote to help staff address the concern, and make regular use of roll call votes except for meeting minutes and consent agenda items. Obviously, that's being taken completely into consideration. Uptake action taken by the committee. 6.3, require ad hoc committees to be board committees and only board members should vote. 6.6, committees should recommend the selection of independent advisors to the board within the respective areas of responsibility. Staff should not vote on these recommendations. There was some discussion on this issue as far as who makes the appointments and who should be on these committees. And it came down to a good compromise, if you will, with the board members. The vote passed unanimously. Let me have a motion for the board here. I move that the State Employees Retirement Board accept the recommendation of the Board Governance and Personnel Committee that for procurements under the Request for Proposals, RFP, process of the Commonwealth Procurement Code 62 PACS, Sections 101 XSEC, the State Employees Retirement System Issuing Office is directed to obtain approval from the board chairperson and the selection of voting members of the evaluation committees, provided that when the board has determined a need to procure independent outside counsel, the evaluation committees shall be comprised exclusively of board members. It's been properly moved. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Second.
I hear a second. Anyone on the question? Anyone on the question? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Becker,
Aye.
Mr. Erdman on behalf of Senator DeSanto,
Aye.
Chair Philman,
Aye.
Mr. Acco on behalf of Representative Franco,
Aye.
Treasurer Garrity,
Aye.
Mr. Lindsay on behalf of Senator Hughes,
Aye.
Mr. Jordan,
Aye.
Representative Schemmel,
Aye.
Ms. Soderberg,
Aye.
Secretary Thal,
Aye.
Mr. Flanagan on behalf of Secretary Vague.
Aye.
Thank you. It's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Continuing on, 6.4, have committee chairs set committee agendas and work plans with input from committee members and executive director and executive liaison for committee. And 6.5, each committee with input from the executive director and the committee's executive liaison should develop an annual list of policy priorities to be addressed by the committee, and these recommended policy priorities shall be approved by the full board. This is to amend the position description for the committee chair and assistant chair, setting forth a process to follow in the development of work plans, which would factor in SIR's strategic plan goals and board policy priorities with the work plan submitted to the board for approval. We had a lot of discussion, not only this 6.4 and 5, but also during the course of the meeting as far as the direction we're going with our committees. Obviously, they're starting to, the dust is settling, if you will, with our committees and the operation, and now we want to fine-tune them a little bit more. So this gives an opportunity to do that. This vote by the committee was unanimous, and I'm going to have the motion now to the board. I move that the State Employees Retirement Board accept the recommendation of the Board Governance and Personnel Committee to amend the Pennsylvania State Employees Retirement System Committee Chair and Assistant Chair position descriptions as set forth in the attachment. It's properly moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Do I hear a second? I hear a second. Anyone on the question? Anyone on the question? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Becker,
Aye.
Mr. Erdman on behalf of Senator DeSanto,
Aye.
Chair Philman,
Aye.
Mr. Acco on behalf of Representative Frankel,
Aye.
Treasurer Garrity,
Aye.
Mr. Lindsay on behalf of Senator Hughes,
Aye.
Mr. Jordan,
Aye.
Representative Schemmel,
Aye.
Ms. Soderberg,
Aye.
Secretary Thal,
Aye.
Alan Flanagan on behalf of Secretary Vague.
Aye.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Going on, 5.1, streamline performance reporting to the board. You see 8 or 9 bullet points there. I won't read those, but they're obviously the staff supports this recommendation, and the performance reporting would go through committees to the board. There's special attention given to the Finance and Member and Participant Services Committee and the Investment Committee, and having those committees meet at times other than the day before the board meeting would ensure that there is sufficient time to develop committee reports that focus on these key metrics and exception. So we will take a look at the calendar for 2022 as well as the function recommendations pertaining to this report to the board and make any adjustments as necessary. 6.1, consider holding.
Mr.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
1.4 was on the independent counsel. I think you, as at the top of the page there.
Oh, yes, I did. My apologies. Yes, 1.4, the board should consider hiring its own independent counsel in specific situations, including potentially expediting the board's role in handling disability reviews and appeals. Joe Marcucci was there to discuss this. It was a comment from the from Funston. One of our board members had made this on the survey, and we really weren't sure exactly. I'm sorry, could someone please be on mute?
Which I think they've discussed with you. They've talked to us about it. We don't want that motion.
Who is that?
That's pretty big.
Yeah, I think we want to just maybe kind of give him a little, yeah, okay, good.
All right, thank you. Again, this was something that we were discussing as far as where the problems were. There may have been issues due to the COVID-19 with some hearings, but Joe Mercucci had made it clear that everything's working fine in the Chief Counsel's office, but they do welcome any comments that the board may have as far as that goes, and will encourage the Chief Counsel to continue to expedite any processes as we go forward as far as that recommendation. We did 5.1, went over 6.1. Consider holding at least some committee meetings in between board meetings, perhaps virtually, rather than the day before, in order to improve decision-making and prep time for board meetings. Discussed that also as part of 5.1. And obviously it's a good idea, and also see how the board members are available for those meetings, but it does, instead of pushing things quickly the day before. 6.2. Ensure that each committee effectively reports out to the full board on all key issues such as investment performance and risk and actuarial risks. It's, again, Investment Committee and Finance and Member Participant Services Committee meet on a day other than the board meeting. This would ensure some more time to do those kinds of issues, and we've already are going to look into that. 6.8, focus committee more on critical success drivers and deeper analysis in evaluating performance and considering alternative strategies and related policy implications. The staff will focus on having committees do a deeper analysis on performance and the drivers behind that performance, and report out to the board on those matters, as well as alternative strategies for board consideration as necessary. So that has been taken under consideration and seriously by the staff. 7.1, develop an overall continuing education plan. I think this is, again, as part of the committees are being fine-tuned. We are also fine-tuning the education plan. Dr. Bell has done a great job of informing us when some classes are coming up due, but we are going to go and continue to acquire knowledge and expand knowledge of the board members, including new board members that come on board to give them some background as far as the way we handle our business here at SERS. 8.2, improve board succession planning for direct reports, as well as making sure there is a good bench strength. This is something which I guess is interesting as far as the staffing goes. We do have upper level executive staff as far as where we should have some sort of a succession plan. The committee should collaborate with SERS staff to oversee leadership succession planning and organizational development. We're talking primarily the executive director, chief investment officer, internal audit director, chief compliance officer, and chief counsel. There are 5 goals to attain which are listed there. So it is, as we go in to getting more details, 9.1 and 9.2 as far as the succession plan. 9.1, establish a more collaborative process in setting goals, including consideration of annual goals linked to the strategic plan and link compensation to the achievement of goals to the extent permitted by the state. And 9.2, provide more informal feedback to direct reports on an ongoing basis, for example, for semi-annually. For the board's direct reports, the committee reviewed the following recommendations from staff. The executive director and chief investment officer are pretty much in place with their compensation requests, and we are going to see if we can clean that up or make it a little more efficient. Internal audit director and chief compliance officer, again, if the chief compliance officer is filled by an attorney and housed in the chief counsel's office, then chief counsel will seek input from the committee and the employee performance review process for the chief compliance officer. And the internal audit director is within the Commonwealth classification and pay structure. Staff suggested deferring any further action regarding the way the Chief Compliance Officer's compensation is established until the class and compensation study is completed, and we'll hear some of that. Chief Counsel, the Board Governance and Personnel Committee charter to provide the Executive Director will seek input from the Board in the employee performance review process of the Chief Counsel. 10.1, meet annually with the external consultants and advisors in executive session without staff present to obtain more independent opinions from the advisors. And it goes along with 10.2 and 10.3. 10.2 is review the performance of all outside advisors on a regular schedule annually, for instance, and discuss board expectations for the coming year. And 10.3, have external advisors provide more information to the board on several topics. The actuary should spend more time advising the board, not just the Finance and Member Services Committee, on various actuarial and investment risks, and explain how they arrive at their recommendations, and have the specialty investment advisors provide general information in their investment area. We spent a lot of time dealing with this. For one thing, for all the years I've been on the SERS board, we've had occasion, not regularly, but on occasion we've had our external consultants come in, just meet with the board, and discuss any kind of issues that we may not be hearing from the staff. We would like to encourage this occurring, but we have some limitations when it comes to the Sunshine Law and what we can talk about in executive session, if you will. So we can deal with personnel issues and everything else that Joe talks about, which we can be discussed in executive session. However, we can't get into any kind of detailed policies as far as that goes. So we will have that coming up, but we will set the parameters for the board to know where we can be discussing them. And I do want to have just the board with the consultants so there can be a heart-to-heart discussion as far as where our operation is going and in light of their experience as well. The SERS Strategic Business Plan update. The committee reviewed an update on the fiscal year 2021-2022 strategic goals. Classification and compensation study update. Katie Matthews gave us a update on the vendor selection for the classification and compensation study of investment professionals and attorneys. We did have a special presentation from Randy Miller and Rachel Tillman from the Fudston Advisory Services, LLC, an overview of their program, BoardSmart, which is a governance e-learning resources tailored for public pension trustees and executives, and that will be looked at by the staff and the board if that's something that is appropriate for us to use as another avenue for us to get more education for the board members. Amendment of fiduciary review policy. The committee took action to recommend to the board to amend the SERS fiduciary review policy to remove the term non-economic in reference to describing SERS in-state managers, minority and women-owned programs, etc., which is currently found in the list of topics included in the SERS fiduciary review policy. The board took that in consideration. It was a unanimous decision on the motion, so I will now move it. I move that the State Employees Retirement Board accept the recommendation of the Board Governance and Personnel Committee to amend the fiduciary review policy as set forth in the attachment. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second.
Anyone on the question? Anyone on the question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Becker,
Aye.
Mr. Erdman on behalf of Senator DeSanto,
Aye.
Chair Philman,
Aye.
Treasurer Garrity,
Aye.
Mr. Acco on behalf of Representative Franco,
Aye.
Mr. Lindsay on behalf of Senator Hughes,
Aye.
Mr. Jordan,
Aye.
Representative Schemmel,
Aye.
Ms. Soderberg,
Aye.
Secretary Thal,
Aye.
Mr. Flanagan on behalf of Secretary Bay.
Aye.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We went into executive session and discussed the adjustments to the pay of the investment professionals and the executive director search. Excuse me. The executive director search, we had an update. As you know, Cheryl Kirchner, retiree, who headed the Human Resources Department, is on board with helping us in our search, along with Katie Matthews. We did agree by a request of some of the board members that we reopen for a 30-day period the advertisement of the ability for us to fill the executive director position. It is not a reflection on the current candidate pool, and the committee will proceed with interviewing consistent with the original timeline. There will be an executive session of the committee at 12:30 p.m. on October 6, 2021 to review the applicants received to date. There will be follow-up with the staff with some of the reports that we've just gone through, and we will have our next board meeting either December 7th or 8th as far as that goes. So we did adjourn yesterday afternoon. Excuse me. Next report is Audit, Risk, and Compliance. Secretary Thal.
Thank you. Yes, the audit risk.
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, yes.
Following the report, we did have, yeah.
Yes. My fault. This is on another part. I do have to have some motions. What we have done is we have combined 5 motions that would have had to come out from each committee because all the committees have been looking at their charters or their bylaws or whatever. So I do have 2 motions I have to make. One is on the bylaws. And again, we're just doing some housekeeping as far as some of the action that we've done at each of the committees. I move that the State Employees Retirement Board accept the recommendation of the Board Governance and Personnel Committee to amend the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania State Employees Retirement System bylaws as set forth in the attachment. It's been properly moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I hear a second. Anyone on the question? Anyone on the question? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Becker?
Aye.
Mr. Erdman, on behalf of Senator DeSanto?
Aye.
Chair Philman?
Aye.
Mr. Acco, on behalf of Representative Frankel?
Aye.
Treasurer Garrity?
Aye.
Mr. Lindsay, on behalf of Senator Hughes?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Representative Schemmel?
Aye.
Ms. Soderberg?
Aye.
Secretary Thal?
Aye.
Mr. Flanagan, on behalf of Secretary Vague?
Aye.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And the second one is, again, we're combining, instead of doing 5 different motions from each of the 5 committees, we're going to condense them into one motion to accept all the recommendations for their amendments to their respective charters. So with that, I move that the State Employees Retirement Board accept the recommendations of the Audit, Risk, and Compliance Committee, the Board Governance and Personnel Committee, the Finance and Member Services Committee, the Investment Committee, and the Securities Litigation Committee to approve the amendments to the respective charters as set forth in the attachments. Do I hear a second to that motion?
Second.
Second.
I hear a second. Anyone on the question? Anyone on the question? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Becker?
Aye.
Mr. Erdman, on behalf of Senator DeSanto?
Aye.
Chair Philman?
Aye.
Mr. Acco, on behalf of Representative Frankel?
Aye.
Treasurer Garrity?
Aye.
Mr. Lindsay, on behalf of Senator Hughes?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Representative Schemmel?
Aye.
Ms. Soderberg?
Aye.
Secretary Thal?
Aye.
Mr. Flanagan, on behalf of Secretary Vague?
Aye.
Thank you, and that's unanimous, Chairman, and thank you for combining those 5 motions into one.
Okay, and thank you, Chris, for reminding me. Okay, with that, Audit, Risk, and Compliance, Chair Secretary Thal.
Thank you, Chairman. The Audit, Risk, and Compliance Committee met yesterday at 3:45. We discussed the first item of business was our independent control audit as required by Act 128 of 2020. It's we're required to do it every 5 years, and it is staff's recommendation and the committee's recommendation that we schedule that for some time in 2024. This will allow the SIRS 2.0 to get live, as well as allow us to build in the cost into our budget. And it also gives us wiggle room of a year of meeting the statutory requirement if we need to push it. Next, Ms. Lynn was talking about, as part of our recent RFP process to secure our independent auditor, that there is a request to follow federal guidelines in the private sector of requiring certain individuals to rotate on and off the contract in order to make sure there's fresh eyes. There's a draft policy that is being worked on and will be continue on that process for potential board action on future meetings. Then we had an internal audit office update talking about Funston's fiduciary report. And we recommend the board maintain oversight of this cybersecurity performance of risks. And we had an executive session, a very well done and lengthy review of some of our IT security risks and what we are doing to address it. We talked about certain staff changes, and then we also talked about the informational item of the employer allocations and pension amounts by employer as part of our GASB 68 report. As I mentioned, we did have an executive session talking about our network vulnerability, cybersecurity. We also got a chief compliance officer update, our last quarterly report from Mr. Houston before Ms. Collins takes over that responsibility. We also talked about the Green Book risk assessment, and then two risks done by two audits done by our audit team, the due diligence on investments, as well as our elderly and foreign audit. So as I said, the internal audit staff will be ongoing the audit rotation draft memo and seeing if we're going to have action. And then we will have after that, we adjourn for the day, and we will have another audit meeting coinciding with our December board meeting in early December. That's my report for submission, Mr. Chairman. And I offer any questions or comments.
Any questions for the secretary? Seeing none. Under new business, do we have Brent Mowry on the call here?
He should be.
Yeah, I believe he is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a special piece of business, the recognition of Brent Mowry. Brent is with Korn Ferry, senior principal with Korn Ferry. But before I read the recognition that we're giving to him as commendation, I got to tell you a story about Brent. If you heard me say last meeting that the original Korn Ferry operation, whatever it was called way back when, it's been changing its names over the years, was back in 1923. And that actually was, we started in 1923, sirs. A couple of years will be 100 years old. But Korn Ferry or their similar operation have been with us since the very beginning. And I made a wisecrack to Brent that he was there since the beginning in 1923 working for Korn Ferry all the way through those 100 years. Now, Brent is a very low-key guy, but he has a very great sense of humor. At the next meeting, after I said that, he didn't bring a calculator with him. He brought an abacus with all the beads on it, and he said he had that since the very first day in 1923 when he started working on our account with Korn Ferry. But if you've heard his reports over the years, I don't find, let me tell you, actuary reports can put you to sleep. There's no doubt about it. But Brent has a way, not only with his knowledge, but the way he gives a layman's account of things, so you can clearly understand where he's coming from. But he has a great sense of humor when it comes to that, which I think is very lacking in actuaries or any accountants, for God's sakes. So I do wish Brent that and I see him there he is. I do wish him the best of luck as he goes on that golden road which he has, and he obviously is younger than I because I've already retired, and he's just retiring now. But let me, on behalf of the board, Brent, let me read you the commendation we will have and get to you. Whereas Brent M. Mowry, FSA, Senior Principal with Korn Ferry, with over 40 years of actuarial consulting experience, is retiring after a career that has included 22 years of service to the Pennsylvania State Employees Retirement Board as the lead actuarial consultant, consistently providing expert service to the SERS board and staff on a full range of actuarial services, including analyzing complex legislative proposals and conducting actuarial evaluations, experience studies, and risk analysis. And whereas during his years of service, SERS has benefited from Mr. Mowry's timely and insightful advice, essential to SERS' successful operation of one of the nation's oldest and largest statewide retirement plans for public employees. And whereas throughout Mr. Mowry's tenure, he provided sound counsel and recommendations which were instrumental in SERS' successful implementation of multiple significant legislative initiatives, including but not limited to significant changes to defined benefit plan structure and the establishment of hybrid and defined contribution plans. Now, therefore, the State Employees Retirement Board commends and expresses its sincere appreciation to Mr. Mowry for his professional excellence and dedication to this agency and the more than 242,000 members and participants we serve, and wishes him the best of health, happiness, and success in his future endeavors. Signed by myself, September 29, 2021. Congratulations, Brett. Really appreciate it. I could shake your hand if I could.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. And please, Mr. Mowry, you have the floor, and give us some words of wisdom as you depart us.
I'll try. Well, that's very touching and appreciated, and I thank the board, I thank the SERS staff, and it's especially meaningful to me because of the great amount of respect that I have for all of you, and and have had for 20 years. I'd like to say a few more words. Back in 1999 when I joined Hay Group, it was to join an actuary named Ed Husted. Ed Husted's a name that many of you know. He was the lead on the account prior to me. Well, when I interviewed and learned that SERS was one of the important clients that Ed was responsible for, that it was pretty much a slam dunk. I mean, many of you know, I was raised in Carlisle, just down the road. I was born in Harrisburg.
I didn't know that.
I have neighbors and high school classmates, who at the time I was considering Hay Group employment, they were state employees, members of SERS. It was really, to me, a cool opportunity to do something that kind of kept me close to my home base, back where my parents lived. So anyhow, I must say that 3 years prior to my hire, a 20-something, still wet behind the ears, Craig Grady showed up, and he was hired by Ed. And I can tell you that Craig immediately, trying to kind of indoctrinate me on SERS, started showing off and, trying to rattle off all this stuff that he knew, but he was hugely helpful to helping me get up to speed. And so, lest you be concerned, Brent is leaving us. Craig is here to stay. I mean, he's got 4 more kids to put through college. So, he's going to outlast most of you. And, he's an invaluable resource. And I couldn't, he made me look so good over the years. You're lucky to have him and to continue to have him as IPART. Well, I showed up just in time back in '99 because it wasn't long after that we were starting to do cost projections related to what became Act 9. And I'll tell you, let me see if I was looking for that actuarial tool that I thought I had near, but if anything, you could actually feel the abacus was warm to the touch back during that period that we were working on the Ag 9 calculations. So, thank goodness we've moved on to devices that kind of withstand heavy use. But anyhow, over the years, as I think back, I've had the privilege and opportunity to work with 3 board chairs. Nicholas Maley, Glenn Becker, right here before my eyes, and current Chairman Philman. I've had a chance to work with 5 executive directors. That goes back to John Brocious, one of the longest standing executive directors, followed by Eric Henry, Len Knepp, Dave Durbin, and now the opportunity to work with Terry. Would you believe I believe I did actuarial expert testimony over 200 times over the years related to workers' compensation cases. And I'll never be able to thank enough Joe Marcucci and Kathy Nolan for helping me get ready for those over the years. So it's been quite a ride. As I think back to 22 years ago, it's probably more people, but the ones that I can think of as definitely having been there from week 1 were the Joes, Torta and Marcucci. But I would guess, I can't remember ever not working with these people. Pam Heil, Rose Agnew, Bill Trong, and Jeff Meyer from the investment office. I might have missed some people, but those are longtime people who I've, not just had the chance to develop working relationships with, but very good friendships that will last forever. And I would also say that over recent months, I've received a lot of communications from people on this call, from people at SERS, and emails and even some cards that I really appreciate, and I have not really been responsive, but I can tell you right now, I certainly have been appreciative, and the attention to me and our relationship means a lot. So I thank you and hope to follow up individually with many people. I'd like to offer a special message to Terry. You've really been an effective and courageous leader, and I'm not sure I'm up to date with your retirement plans, but I think they're coming up soon. I'll just leave it that way. And so in advance of that, I'd like to congratulate you and thank you. And, the support that you've shown Korn Ferry, your actuary, that's what has earned you the support that we've shown you. I mean, it's a mutual thing. And so, what you do for us is appreciated, and we hope that you have found us responsive to your needs.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Brent.
Sure. I'd also like to offer an early congrats to everybody on this call who guts it out till 2023. That's going to be quite a year. The centennial. I regret that I'm going to miss it, but who knows? Maybe I'll come out of the woodwork and make an appearance. But it'll be not only something you'll all celebrate, but Korn Ferry. It's Korn Ferry or predecessor actuarial firms that have been there for the 100 years along with you. And we're mighty proud of that. And Chris and Craig will certainly lead the celebration. Okay, and finally, on a more personal note, I became a grandfather last month. Technically, a step-grandfather. So my stepdaughter had her first child, but there's more coming. I have 2 pregnant daughters. So we've got baby number 2 due October 9, baby number 3 due October 31. Who says I'm retiring? I'm just changing professions. And I can tell you I've been practicing diaper changing, but it's not really coming back fast to me. So. But, I thank you all again. This recognition is something that is meaningful, and I'll always cherish the memories of the experiences I've had with all of you. I wish you all the best going forward. Happy retirement to all of you when the day comes, and thank you again.
Thank you, Brett. Appreciate it. Very, very decent. What a professional you are, and we'll miss you. There's no doubt about it.
Mealing's Future.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, with that, we'll go into our number 9, reports of executive director and agency staff. Terry Sanchez, you're up.
Thank you, Chairman. I just have a few items. First, we'll start with the results of a number of notational ballots from the July 2021 board meeting regarding the following accounts. First was the account of Carol L. Hollern. The State Employees Retirement Board has denied claimant's appeal requesting her retirement account be reinstated after being forfeited under the Public Employee Pension Forfeiture Act, Act 140. Number 2, the account of Bernard W. Ryan, deceased. The State Employees Retirement Board has granted, in part, the motion of Lisa L. Ryan deeming SIR's answer untimely and SIR's to be in default of, and deeming the relevant basic facts stated in claimant's appeal letter to be admitted. The board also denied relief for the alleged insufficient specificity of SIR's answer, determining SIR's answer to be sufficiently specific. Number 3, the account of James Wolford. The State Employees Retirement Board has granted the State Employees Retirement System's motion to dismiss claimant's appeal related to his application for and receipt of a disability benefit which has been discontinued. This appeal is dismissed with prejudice. Next, you'll find in tab 9A, Romanet 2, legislative update. The one item I'd like to point out is that on August 19th, 2021, SIRS was one of several entities asked to testify before and answer questions from the subcommittee in regard to several key pension-related topics, including governance, investments, manager fees and expenses, transparency, financial review, and pension forfeiture. Again, this was the House State Government Committee, Subcommittee on Pensions, Benefit, and Risk Management, and it was an informational hearing. Joining me on the panel at the table was Sarah McSurdy, our Chief Financial Officer, Jim Nolan, our Chief Investment Officer, Joe Marcucci, our Chief Counsel, and also in the wings with support, Joe Torta, our Deputy Executive Director, Office of Member and Participant Services, and Chris Houston, our Deputy Executive Director for Administration. We thought it was a very stimulating and productive discussion. In addition to providing our prepared remarks, we provided additional information and follow-up on the cost of previous collars and past underfunding, employer contribution rates, Act 2019-105, the pre-funding legislation. We provided information on its impacts and potential other pre-funders. We provided information on the impacts of plan maturity, speaking of our system coming up on 100 years, and also if and how SIRS incorporates elements of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act into its operations. Again, I'd just like to mention our thanks to the House State Government Committee and the Pensions, Benefits, and Risk Management Subcommittee for inviting SIRS to appear before the subcommittee and for the courtesy and consideration shown to us by members of the committee. And before I go on, Mary, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, quick question. Did you have a PowerPoint presentation that you used for the committee meeting?
We did.
And is that available?
We will upload that to Board Docs, Mary. We can make that available.
Okay,
on
great.
Board Docs.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your interest.
Yeah.
Very much appreciated. There's also under the same tab information on some legislation that we are continuing to monitor, but nothing specific to report on today. And we continue to schedule and seek out and schedule meetings with various members of the General Assembly. And then finally, you will find at tab 9A Romanet 3, Romanet III, is the draft proposed meeting dates for the board for 2022. So you want to go ahead and pencil them in. You can give a look, and if there are any issues you want to bring to our attention, you can send us an email or note or give me a call. And then on December, we can, firm them up a bit. Keep in mind that one of the recommendations was to consider some of the committees, particularly the Investment Committee and the Finance and Member Services Committee, that they may decide to meet a few days or so in advance of the board meeting. So there may be some adjustments to this, but let's just put this down and pencil it in so you have something to schedule around. And again, we can try to confirm at our December meeting. And that is my report, Chairman.
Any questions for Terry? Okay. Thank you. There's no Chief Investment Officer report nor a Chief Financial Officer report. Our next item is executive session, and Joe, I guess you'll be setting this up.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The Sunshine Act allows an executive session to discuss quasi-judicial deliberations and for the board to consult with its lawyers to discuss litigation, pending or actual, or matters which are covered by the attorney-client privilege or other lawful privileges, or that would lead to the disclosure of information or confidentiality protected by law. The items on the executive session agenda, the pending or threatened benefits and administration litigation, and the report from the Chief Compliance Officer fall within these categories and are appropriate topics for an executive session.
Okay, we'll wait to have the clear, and Don, you let us know.
Before we enter the executive session, we'll make a few changes. Here, technically in the boardroom, we will make you aware. And as a reminder, the public meeting will resume on this live stream connection when the executive session is complete. Good afternoon. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. We're coming out of executive session. Joe, do you need a response?
No, there's nothing to say as we come back in.
Thank you very much. The next piece on the agenda is board comments, announcements, dates to remember. Our next meeting of the State Employees Retirement Board will be December 7th and 8th of 2021. There being no other business, motion for adjournment is on the floor. Can I hear a second?
Second.
Second. I hear a second. Any opposed? Any questions? All in favor, aye?
Aye. Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carried. Thank you very much, everybody. It was a good 2 days of activity. So thanks again. See you soon.
Thanks all.